All right, folks, you're in tune to Mullins Music and Memories. And of course, we've got a lot of things that are happening around the world. I know a lot of folks have been paying attention to what's happening in the sports world. And we've got a championship match that is set for this coming week, later on this week, that being the Lakers against Miami. And find out how that all plays out. And of course, a lot of folks will be paying attention to the debates that'll be taking place on tomorrow. So we know that we've got that first presidential debate between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump, and that will be taking place on tomorrow. So a lot of folks will be engaged in that conversation and trying to find out how that goes and whether that influences folks in their election or what goes on in that respect. So there are a number of things that are happening in our community, and we're looking forward to finding more and more topics to go on. And a lot of folks will be engaged in conversation and learning a lot more about what's happening in the world. By the way, just had another great episode of the radio show with Mark Lee earlier today, and that featured Cheston, who was a person involved in the financial world and a longtime theater friend of mine, none other than Ira David Wood. So definitely was great having their conversation going on and learning a lot about that and things along those lines. So we've got some great guests that have joined me here as well. So we're looking forward to having a great conversation, and we might be joined by some more as well. So definitely there's a number of things that are happening in our community, and we're excited to hear these great conversations. So I want folks to tune in and to learn a lot of the things that are going on in our world at this date and time. Like I said, a lot of folks are paying attention to what's happening with the pandemic and how folks are surviving within that pandemic, and a number of other things that are going on here in our universe and in our world that is taking place. So, like I said, I do want to once again thank Cheston for joining me on that last show. And as a matter of fact, y'all may see that I will put across a banner of his business as well as the business of theater in the park. Because, like I said, I think that was on the last show, and some folks might have even got the wrong branded information. And we do know that branding is very important. So definitely you should go to buythebookconsultants.com and learn more about what Cheston is all about. That's buythebookconsultants.com, and you can learn more about what Cheston is doing and about his business and all of that. And of course, he also had Ira David Wood talking to us about theater in the park. So he's definitely going on there with theater in the park. So glad to have both of them on. And of course, y'all can see that there's a number of things that are going on. But I want to bring my guests on, and I'm going to bring Larry on and also bring Madison on very shortly. But Larry is involved in the world of entertainment, and glad to have him on the show. And I've got some other folks that will be joining me also. So definitely glad to have that conversation. As a matter of fact, I see that Tim Sohn is watching us. He's over there in the Pennsylvania area, if I remember correctly, and he was saying hello to us. So definitely saying that he was out there doing some walking and some watching, and not much else was going on in that regard. So definitely glad to have him on the show and everything. And we've got a great guest that we are looking forward to having in conversation. So I'll start first with Larry, then I'm going to bring on Walter Greason and Madison as well, because there's a number of great conversations that we will be engaged in. But Larry, tell folks a little bit about yourself and what you're all doing in the world of entertainment. And then, like I said, I'll bring in Madison, who is a friend of mine from the world of radio. And then I'll bring in our very big time guest, Walter Greason, who is involved in things of that nature. So definitely, Larry, talk to us a little bit about what you've got going on and what you're doing.
What's going on? My name is Larry, Brother Saeed. I'm a filmmaker. I dabble in theater a little bit. I have done some theater, but I'm a filmmaker. The co-creator of the program called Paper to Film, which we started in 2013 with my business partner Tiffany Keeler. I'm a lovely husband. I got a lovely wife. I got 2 lovely grandchildren that I love more than anything. And I just completed a film last year, well, in February, titled Butter, and it's like pretty much like a modern day version of Coffee and Foxy Brown. And what I wanted to do with that film, and then when we watch movies, the black exploitation era was a big push for us, because it really got us gave African Americans an opportunity to put a lot of black material out. You know what I mean? And even though people thought they was cheesy, they made money and people was watching them. So it became like this phenomenon. So I just wanted to, do a produce a film that was a tribute to the women of that era because even right now we don't have African American female heroines like that, them women of that era. It's very, very, very rarely that they make a film, you know, consistently like they do with other female films. So I just did that to pay homage to the women in that era. And what I'm doing right now is I'm producing a film titled "We're Coming to Get Our Check," and we're taking America in front of the world court for reparation. So it's a hearing that we're presenting our case in front of the world court against America, and it's all based on the Fifth and 14th Amendment. So we got a judge, we got it's gonna be deep because we dealing with a lot of stuff, that I that doesn't really come to the forefront when we do films about African American freedom. Most of the films that we see and the material that we see is always about us being the victim or being killed, in that light. It's like slavery stuff. So I'm just taking it to another level, and we're gonna put America on trial, and they got to answer these charges. And it's the script was co-written by my partner who was an attorney out of New Jersey. So we really got some heavy stuff going on with that.
Wow. So it sounds like y'all are going to base this on things that are going on in the current world. And it also sounds like you're doing some real powerful roles with that earlier film to try to get folks to understand the power of great women actresses and things of that nature. But this film that you're doing right now sounds very fascinating. And I do want to bring in Walter as well. And then I might bring in Madison also.
Okay.
But want to bring in Walter because Walter has actually done some research around things along those lines and everything because he's actually been involved in things to do with urban planning and things of that nature. So I don't know if you heard in the background, but Larry's working on a film about reparations. So he's actually going to do a film that sounds like it's a fictional based film, but it's going to be putting folks on trial with reparations. And I know that you've been involved in a number of things as well. So I'd love to hear you talk about your work and what you're doing. And of course, I have met you through Shri, and I know that you're very much involved in the whole urban landscape, and we know that gentrification is a very big issue. We see it big times here in Durham, North Carolina, and around the Triangle, but it's definitely an issue that is impacting a number of folks. So I would love to hear your reflections on that. And I'm thinking we've even seen it more impactful because of what's going on in the coronavirus, and the way that the pandemic is being handled. But I'd love to hear your reflections on that as well.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me a couple minutes to come in and talk to everybody, Brother Saeed. It's a pleasure to learn about your work. Thank you for sharing. There's so much in the series of questions that you posed. I hope to boil it down relatively quickly and make it productive. And if something sparks, we can go all the way in on it. But yeah, to start off, I mean, you got to look at the basis for reparations is the dispossession of Africans from the very first time they arrived on the soil. So many folks love to talk about, Charleston and Virginia and New Orleans and the origins of the transatlantic slave trade across the American South. But so much of my research is about the North and the slave trade in
Right.
Boston, the slave trade in Philadelphia, the slave trade in Trenton. And I blew people away talking about Wilmington, Delaware. They were like, "What? Slaves in Delaware?"
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm
right
from
up to
that
the
area.
Civil
That's
War.
where I'm from, that area.
And see, that's the thing. Like you start to uncover all these stories and you realize it's the whole country is built on slave money, slave labor. And the way that we get back, we got to kind of account for the way that enslaved Africans counted as money is the big thing that my research has done is saying that, well, I look at a couple scholars named Walter Johnson, Sven Beckert have written these books about it wasn't just cotton. It wasn't just sugar or tobacco that was making the economy grow. It was literally the fact that you didn't have much gold or silver in these colonies. And so when
Hmm.
people put money into the Africans that they bought, that was a way of moving money from place to place. And they got insurance based on the Africans that they owned. And then when they had children, when they forced these enslaved Africans to have children, that was new money. And so like Virginia and Maryland from 1830 to 1860, it wasn't about growing tobacco anymore. It was about forcing Black women to have more babies.
Oh,
And so you have
babies.
these stories of Black women having 8 kids, 10 kids, 12 kids. Worst case I've seen is Black women had 40 children, 40 children children, forced pregnancies. And this is the insanity that went down to try and drive the creation of the slave economy. And so, beyond that, the next step is then once you have the Civil War breakout and once you have the Emancipation Proclamation, the shift towards an industrial economy reflects what happened during the first half of the 19th century. That growing the railroad firms, growing the banks, growing the coal companies, all of this is predicated on using people as currency, as holding immigrants and blacks and Chinese people as property, even though they don't formally call them enslaved anymore. And that process goes right up into the 1940s, 1950s. Honestly, the place I'm from in Jersey, it became this huge suburban community, but all the original money was exploited on family and friends of mine that were black farm laborers who were essentially kept still in slavery up until the 1980s when I was a young person. And so that stuff we don't just dig into it. You got to dig into that local history and doing these kinds of films. That's one of the most powerful ways to get people to start ask more questions and get better answers.
And my friend that's working with me on the film, he was telling me about the. Now I want to say this because I don't. He said that in Jersey, when this GI Bill came, where people could buy homes, he said he gave me this crazy number about all these money these white people got opposed to what black people got, and it was crazy because it was probably like the veterans something. It's like a veteran, you get your loan for your house and all that kind of stuff. He said you would be crazy about how many black people wasn't getting these loans, but like he was saying, all these white people is getting these loans and all this property. You know what I mean? And it was
it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. From like 1937 forward, there's this group called the Federal Housing Administration.
Right.
And they underwrote these loans that said, oh, if you're in a black neighborhood, you're redlined. You're not going to get any money. So if you're going to get it, it's going to be like double or triple the interest rate. And so they've systematically, for the better part of 60 years, just said, oh, if you're in a black neighborhood, your property's never going to gain value.
It's no value.
You can a white neighborhood and buy a house in 1940 for $20,000 and then sell it in 1990 for like $500,000 or $700,000, just massive profit. If you're a black household, they would initially sold you the same house. Instead of 20,000, it'd be 50,000. Right. And then that 50,000, by the time you get to 1990, they're like, oh, now it's worth 70,000. Talking about 50 years later, it never really appreciated because black people owned it. And so that loss is insane. You're talking about trillions of dollars that white people gained, but black people didn't because the federal government underwrote loans just for white people.
And when Trump said something last week what people didn't understand, or 2 weeks ago, he said he's trying to pass a bill where underprivileged to him people can't live in certain neighborhoods. That's just going back to that damn white line and shit. He said that.
Yeah, no. So he's fighting a program that I helped put in. Like back under Obama, there's this program called Building One America. And it was part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that got passed in 2009. And we were basically tearing down the walls of residential segregation. We were making it so that every community had to have some kind of affordable housing. The Department of Environmental Protection was in, the Department of Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, all of them collaborated to basically work over about a 20-year window to eliminate all residential segregation. He tore the heart out of that. First thing he did when he got into office is to make sure, no, if you're in a white neighborhood, nobody poor, no big families, you're going to keep it just the way you always had it.
And even if you black middle class, he still got it so whereas he don't want you in that neighborhood.
Yes.
So what people don't understand is like, as us being black middle class, if we're not allowed to progress in our society or even in our wealth, we're not really the black middle class. We're still the lower end of the totem pole. We just look like we the middle class.
You spend got some houses. They'll give you some credit to buy a fancy car. They'll give you some credit to get a house in your own neighborhood.
About that, Mr. Greason, because that's one of the things I'm always hearing about, and I think we've seen more increases of gentrification even in what's going on in the pandemic. And of course, there's a number of folks that have been getting these loans and things of that nature. But then the question becomes, are we actually spending the money in a effective way? So as one that is an urbanist and everything, what is your thoughts on that as to how we are doing in terms of the way we're engaging the community? Because I do think that there like I said, I live in Durham, North Carolina, and I know that there are still communities that are having very high rents that people can't necessarily afford. The apartments are still having very high rents and everything, like anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000, which might not be that much to folks in New York, but it can be quite a bit if you're in rural North Carolina or even in a decent sized city and everything. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Walter, and everything, and what you think
Yeah, my number
going
one thing. Yeah, the stuff I've been working on for the last decade has really been about the ways the structure, the financial infrastructure of the country works to not just undervalue black assets, but to prevent black households, black communities from benefiting from real strong commercial and industrial investment. And so you had an infrastructure of industrial and financial capital in among black communities prior to 1970. But the way that we desegregated, the way that we integrated, dismantled nearly every strong black institution, especially in the financial sector. And so that's why you don't see very many strong black banks anymore or insurance companies. These firms that tended to be the backbone of segregated black communities disappeared because they didn't have the market capital to compete with white owned businesses. All of a sudden, these larger firms came in and bought up their market share. And it's been devastating. Like black institutions struggle. Just look at historically black colleges or black churches. None of them have the financial wherewithal that they had 50 years ago. So for me, the biggest step was that when it came to the sectors that grew after 1970, whether it's computers or medical science, the finance sector, these things all exploded in value over the last 50 years. But no black firms were really participating in it. When you get
Right.
black and startup companies, if they are a single person and they're managed to get $100,000 or $500,000 together, that's a miracle. And then they got to fight against friggin' Google or Amazon to try and carve out share. And just it's not fair. It's just impossible to kind of climb up that mountain. And so finding ways where we pool our resources in a number of areas from my research is ownership of land first and foremost, so that subsistence economies where we can feed and clothe ourselves come back. But then beyond that, we do need industrial investment, and that means partnering with economies in the Caribbean, economies on the continent, frankly, economies in Southeast Asia. The ways that we actually grow global enterprise, and really the man who inspired me to this was Claude Anderson with his book Powernomics. He's looking at the diaspora and looking at the ways we invest together and leverage banking infrastructure within a global system that works to our disadvantage. But for our children, for the people who are middle school and high school, we've got to be teaching them technical skills, engineering skills, how do they get medical skills before they graduate high school so that they have a competitive advantage and make good decisions about what kind of careers they want to pursue within the global marketplace. Trying to train folks, like I love folks who do electrical and plumbing and HVAC, and you can make a really good living doing that. But at the same time, it's low growth. Like you got to count on who hires you around your county, around your region to make that end. Whereas I'm working at brothers at Tuskegee that they're building like digital infrastructures that they're getting hired out of China, they're getting hired out of Brazil, and it's just got a higher ceiling of how much income they can earn. So
Right.
that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about is how do you get into the industry where you get the most amount of capital in the shortest amount of time?
Well, I'm feeding off what you're saying about property and land, and and I tell people this is what I tell people. I'm 60 something years old. I've seen it from the beginning up to now. And what people don't understand is when they say, because you back when I was coming up, we had a lot of factory jobs in the cities and small towns. Even if it was a piecework job, people was going to work. So they fooled us on the notion that these jobs was going overseas, but these jobs was going to prison.
Mm-hmm.
So the system said, you know what, we got to figure it out. The same jobs that these people are doing, we'll put these same jobs in the prison system and start. That's why the black crime rate and the prison rate went up. Because if you take stuff out, it's like this, and you got 10 dogs in a cage, and you feeding them damn dogs every day, they loyal as hell. But once you stop feeding them, chaos breaks out. So once they took these small jobs, these piecework factory jobs, back then they had trainings like they had IOC, all these programs that help young people get a trade. They took all that out the community, and that's why we're in the position we're in today. Because once you took our resources, and then they forced us into selling what little property we own. They forced us into selling that. So once you do all that, what you see is what you get. You understand what I'm saying? And so people, and I tell people this all the time: stop saying that we destroyed our community. We didn't destroy our community. Those came in and put us in a position, and now we're in survival mode.
That's it. That's it. Just one real quick lesson. I don't want to take up the whole time. I know there's a lot for the show, but like over the last 10 years, I've been working with black families and frankly, any friend families that want to just take that leap with their children. So for like most part, I'll do this for free, for like 100, $200, but I can show y'all how you get into the economy where over the first 20 years of your work, you're going to make $2 million minimum. So how do you make the strategy to it? Identify your market, build your product, and get it out, distribute it efficiently so people want to continue to buy from you. Like anytime you're trying to build that, that's the heart. That's my heart. I'm trying to get it so that whatever you make reaches the most people. But that takes strong building. Like my first example, I was 12 years old, and like we were trying to feed people for very little, senior families, disabled families, and we were having everybody pitch in like $13 at the first of the month. Then when it came to the second of the month or third week of the month, when food was running out, all of a sudden we had a little bank. It might have been
Right.
130, it might have been $300, but we had food to go out and get,
Get
hundreds of
help
pounds of
people out.
food from the grocery store, bring it back to the church, distribute it up in boxes, and all of a sudden those 15, 20, 30 families had enough food to make it the last couple of weeks.
Right.
That kind of cooperative strategy where we're building for each other, that's we've got to adapt that for today.
Right. And this. Go
I
ahead,
definitely
Mark.
agree with you on that because one of the things I was wondering about, Walter, is you talked about the land loss. We've definitely had a lot of land loss in our community, and it's been throughout the South, but I would even argue the Northeast as well. So I know that one of the things that I have in my family is my mom and her two sisters, because we lost one of the sisters. They have some shared land, so they was passed from generation to generation. But I don't think that that happens enough in our community, and I know that that's one of the things that you talk about even in your research. So, what are some of the ways that we can encourage people to maintain that land?
Yeah, so a lot of times folks look at it like, okay, how am I going to pay tax on it? How am I going to maintain? And that's the same thing. Like you've got to build commercial enterprise around that. And mostly, I'm sad to say, people get into conflict over potential real estate value. So they see what happened around my part and around the whole country is that if you have 10 acres or if you got 100 acres, all of a sudden somebody comes along and offers you $1 million or $2 million or $5 million for that lot, and you think you're getting something, you think you've gotten some real money for this, but then they turn around and subdivide it, and that 10-acre lot turns into 20 lots that they're selling each house for $500,000. All of a sudden they made $10 million and gave you one. Like,
Right.
you know, like how do you get cut in so that you're a partner on the end of the sale when the profit is maximized, so that instead of walking away with 1 million, you're walking away with five. Or if it's that
Right.
100-acre lot, they subdivide it into 200. All of a sudden, you're talking about $100 million. You would have walked away with 5 million, but you could have got up with 50. And so,
You
like,
know, I just think that come from us. I just think that's come from us not understanding the economics of the economics. You
no
see what I'm
doubt.
saying? It's not. It's like even like with me as a filmmaker, and somebody might come say, hey, I got this script I've been working on. Somebody say, hey, I'm gonna give you $250,000 for that script, and that script might be worth more than that. You know what I mean? So I sell my script, and then these people get all this money. But if I had went to somebody, let's just say Mark, say, hey, Saeed, this is how this industry really works. We can get more for this. If I had went to somebody like him, or maybe somebody like you, say, hey, this is how this system works. We can get more than this. I could have got more of my value. But I
Yeah.
think we, as black people, I'm gonna just say people, I think we're so afraid and that to go out and seek that extra help because we thinking in the back of our mind that somebody trying to get over on us. We try to do it ourselves, and then we end up getting caught up.
Yeah, because the
Well,
other
that's
thing that
real
I've
too.
noticed, and I want to hear what you guys say about this, Walter, is that even in our cities, like I said, I'm here in Durham, and I've seen a number of times that even there won't be enough folks trying to even protect the land that they've got. Like I said, we're near North Carolina Central University, and I know that there's a number of folks that have been trying to move out and even buy that land because they want to expand the university footprint. So even sometimes within our own community, we got folks that are trying to expand footprints, and I don't know necessarily that the people are getting what their land is worth. So I'm wondering, are you seeing that as well throughout the country? Because I've seen not just here, but whether it's I live actually currently closer to Duke's campus, but I've got family that lives near North Carolina Central University. So I've seen it on both our HBCUs as well as some of our other universities as well. So I just wondered, in your research around gentrification, are you seeing that that's happening and we're also being pushed away from the downtown areas. Because I know that a lot of the places aren't able to be afforded in downtown because they're so expensive.
Yeah, no, that's one of the craziest things. So, my second book is all about dispossession of Black people from their land and the consequences of it. And it's one of the worst things I've ever had to try and tell folks about. But my people come from down Newbern and just north of Wilmington, and so I get down around Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte pretty often. And yeah, like it's hot, and I even see down South Carolina, same thing, same deal. Big investors come in and they're trying to move Black people to less desirable locations, and then folks don't have the wherewithal to kind of stand up and just make the best economic decision. Like, even if you don't sell, the pressure legally, I've seen people been pushed out by eminent domain over this kind of stuff. They've taken 25% on the dollar for like what they thought they could get out of the value of their house. So there's a lot of bad options. But what I do have a good story up in Philly just this past week. There was a coalition of local homeowners and tenants that came together to push back on developers, and basically they got it away from the city in the court that there were 50 properties that they could take into a community land trust. And the community land trust means that whenever anybody that's a big investor has to come in, they have to go into mediation. They have to like sort out, okay, what is your plan
Hmm.
for this, and how much money is being made on the back end? How are you going to compensate the people who are involved in the trust? And so it gives people who are working class families or poor families a chance to really get the maximum value out of these real estate transactions.
Yeah, and
That's what's up right there.
go ahead,
That's
Larry.
what's up. Now I'm saying that's what's up right there. And you know, me and him both from being up north. Philly is they the most. Listen, when people talk about a racist city, Philly is the most racist city in the. They worse than the most racist southern city in the South, and people will tell you that. And you know, being from up north, and I tell people this all the time. Every time, you know, Malcolm said it. You know, once you north of the Mississippi, whatever, you in the South, and it's rough on us. It's even rougher on us up north because everybody got this perception that everything is on the up and up, but it's not. We catch a hell up there, and my people catch hell up there. That's you know, and I got out of the north for that reason.
And Walter, you brought something earlier that is very much interesting, and I've heard other people talk about it as well. And that's this concept of trying to develop partnerships with our Caribbean brothers, our brothers in the African countries, as well as you even said the Southeast Asian folks. How can folks go about doing that? Because I oftentimes find that folks will put a mental block around that kind of partnership because they feel that even though that is definitely our brothers and cousins that are over across the pond, that there is some sort of disconnect from with our community, and that they feel that they can't make these alliances happen, even though a lot of other people around the world are doing alliances with their folks, whether it's the Italians and the Italian Americans, whether it's the Irish and the Irish Americans. But for some reason, there's a disconnect in our community. I would also argue in the brown community as well, because I don't always see it in the Hispanic community either. But I was just wondering, what are some of the ways that you feel that we can break those stereotypes that exist and actually create these business alliances?
Yeah, no, for me, like I don't think it's easy at all. You got to work through a lot of different definitions and cultural barriers. People who just use language and have a different perspective on things, even though there's something common about ethnicity or race. And so it takes a lot of time and trust building and purposeful kind of determination. The thing that works in African Americans' favors, folks who are born in the United States, is that we have a familiarity with the way things work, even though we don't know as much as we should. We get access to dollars that make a big difference. Like, I got partners in Kenya and Ethiopia that, in rural parts of those countries, those people live on $300 a year. And so, like, if you're talking about like a church I was working with, they built an orphanage over in Kenya. But I was like, yo, we need to set up a trade relationship. What can we buy from the people there that they're making that's like a normal part of their products, but we're actually
Hmm.
buying it from them for use for what we want to do at the church? And it turned out it was bananas. And for like next to nothing for us, for the church, you were talking about less than $1,000 a year. We were getting whole stacks of bananas for Sunday school, for any kind of like food service program from our partners in Kenya. And for them, the money that they got from us, that $800, $900, was ridiculous money. Like, they were able to stretch that in ways that you could never imagine, for medical care, for child care, looking out for seniors. And so the strength of the American dollar internationally, and especially on the African continent, it is enormous. And you can do so much to help develop with that. But if we were to like make that a larger coalition, that's like I'm working with this one group down south that's the Historic Black Towns and Settlements Coalition. And yeah, they're looking to say, how do we do this internationally? They're talking to people in the Caribbean about restoring black communities, rebuilding road systems and sewer systems. How do you do that when you go to Ghana and Nigeria, which have serious water treatment issues? Like the money that you get out of a spot like Atlanta or Birmingham or Houston, like in this country, you feel like, oh, these cities are struggling. The size of their economies relative to some place like Accra, it just doesn't compare. Like as big an economy as successful as Ghana is, it's nothing compared to Atlanta. And so just a tiny fraction of the money coming out of a successful southern city. Look at Durham's budget one time and just compare that to what's going on. What a successful Caribbean city. Take it to a successful island like St. Kitts or what do you call it? I'm just totally blanking on the name. Guyana. That's not the one I was trying to come with. But like you compare it to any of these Caribbean economies, and these American urban economies that we control are just these massive investment opportunities that could enrich all of these other communities. And that's our leverage. We say if you want access to this, this is the way the business has to happen.
Can I ask you a question, Walter?
Yeah.
Do you think like we waste? I'm not going to say waste. Do you think that you probably said that we don't take advantage of our? You just said it right. We don't take advantage of our wealth over here, as far as urban Americans, and try to stretch it to other countries or other continents like that.
Yeah, like individuals do it, but we don't do it collectively well. Like if we were building that with somebody like Stacey Abrams, I think in your neighborhood, William Darity up at Duke,
Yes,
these
I know we
folks, there's so much knowledge, there's so many ways to kind of stretch the way that they have access to capital, but we don't maximize it. Like I'm sorry, like William Darity should never ask for a dollar anywhere on the planet. Like that man is like W.E. Du Bois. It's just like any way that you like. Duke is ridiculous, right? And then like the power of his ideas, he should be able to travel anywhere, call a convention, and be like, boom, this is how we're going to take the next step. And now we have $5 million behind what we're about to do. Like that shouldn't even ever be a question. But I know because I talk to him every day, he has to fight uphill. Like there's resources, but it's not resources like that. And so that's what's crazy is that we got to really break the door down so that the folks who are really trying to build in our interest have everything they need.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that part of, to come back to what Larry was talking about, do you feel that not enough of our own leaders are doing that? Like we've got a number of great entrepreneurs in the African American community. We've got all these folks that are doing stuff in the sports and the entertainment world that are making millions, if not the billions of dollars and everything. But I don't know that we're necessarily seeing enough of them. Like, there are some that are doing work. I know LeBron has done some work around schools, and there's others that have done work. I think Kenny Smith around his Jet Academy and stuff has done some stuff, but it's not enough in my mind. And I was wondering, do you think that some of it is at the fault of our entrepreneurs because they are so much in that kind of me kind of mindset of just defending for themselves? And I get that everybody wants to be in that survival mindset and wants to survive in whatever ways they can. But I know that there's a blues song that I am a big fan of, that one of their lines is, "I ain't seen an armored car at a funeral yet." And so that's where I come at it, is I'm thinking that you can't take it with you. So we need to find ways to actually bring it back to the community and everything. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Walter.
And can I piggyback off of that for you answer this
Yeah, go ahead,
question?
Larry.
And another thing is this, and it's like what he was saying. Why aren't these athletes or entertainers that's wearing Nike, wearing all this garment, saying, "Hey, brother," and my whole thing with me is piecework and work factories and putting businesses. So why don't they go to these companies and say, "Hey, brother," and because that's why I like Stephen Marbury. They blackballed him because he was making a move and he was doing what he felt was best for black people. But he said, "Well, listen, why don't y'all let's put a little factory here, do a little something here, and do this and that in these communities." But I don't like Mark saying, I don't see us going that way. School is good, and I think everybody needs to get some type of education. But some people just want to get up in the morning and go to work
It's
and
real.
come home. You know what I'm saying? So why aren't they like focusing on this and focusing on just say, "Hey, we're gonna force these companies' hands and say, hey, boom," because Chinese will do it. If they say we're gonna go mess with Zing and all these Chinese corporations, they'll put a business in that neighborhood. But
Yes.
it's just like the American companies, like, no, we're not gonna do it. And well, do they even ask them to do it?
Yeah, so I had this conversation. This is going to sound crazy. I had this conversation maybe 17, 18 years ago with Bill Russell. He was visiting Philly. And so we were sitting there and like chopping it up after he was doing a book event for some young people. And I was like, listen, man, like, why is the NBA not trying to get these brothers who have large net worth just to pool a little bit, 1%, 2%, put it into a community fund so it's generating new enterprises in NBA cities that a lot of these
Right,
people are sacrificing their last dollar to get in and see a game. Where is this? He's like, oh, well, Gary Payton in Seattle's trying to do this. This is how long ago Gary Payton was in Seattle. So
right.
you
Yeah,
know this
and
was a
yeah,
while ago. But like that pitch, I'm pleased to say, has been a huge push from Chris Paul and LeBron. Like they're
right.
building quietly this cooperative economic network that looks at black
They got
communities.
that Players Network now, something like that. That's
Yes,
just
and that's the
yeah,
thing. Like they're looking to put in seed capital to start to grow global enterprise for that next generation. People who are under the age of 25 who are then looking to take that next step. And so it doesn't take a lot of money to get the enterprise up and going. Like somebody like me, the stuff I do is that if you put in $1,000 within a year, I could probably get you back 20 to 25,000. Like that's the multiplier that is most persuasive to them. Is that if they're putting in $10,000 back, they want to see that enterprise grow to $250,000 or $500,000 within like 24 months. And so that's just the core principle is that they're very used to people doing what happened to a lot of brothers in the 90s is that they're putting out money endlessly and then like all of it's gone all of a sudden and then it's just nothing left. And
right,
so you can't let that happen. This stuff like Vin Baker, makes $120
right,
million in his career, but then he's selling coffee at Starbucks trying to make ends meet. Like
right,
you had to have people who surround them and build it up so that if you got 15 or 20 or 50 or $100 million, that's seed money that's going to multiply, and so that you end up very quickly with 250,000, 500,000 and up. And that's what we need more of. That's I wish I could set one up in all 200 biggest black communities in this country, but like that takes time. Got to have folks who build into the network trust each other. Folks in Greek life have been doing this. Folks in the Caribbean community have little strategies for the doing this, but none of it is big enough to make the ripple that you guys are trying to talk about.
Well, I just want to, hopefully, when we get done talking, I want to get your information because I want to talk to you about working with me, coming in Greensboro. Like when you were talking about the gentrification thing, hey, if you come to Greensboro, Mark and Mr. Green, you will see how much land UNCG they pretty much brought everything over and up and down Lee Street.
Mm.
You
Yeah, that's
know,
real true. Definitely. Mr. Greason, I would love to hear you talk about urban planning and what got you into this, and it's just the whole concept of urban thought and everything, because you've definitely been in this for a while. So I'd love to hear what got you involved in this. I've actually had the pleasure of not just knowing Sandy Darity, who's actually a distant cousin and everything, but I've also had the pleasure of knowing the now late great Phil Freelon, because I've known his family and
Mm.
everything. So I do know that urban people are and urban architects are very important. So I'd love to know your story and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, so I'll do this real quick. I grew up in a very small rural part of New Jersey, where folks sacrificed for me real hard my whole childhood. Nobody had a whole lot, and so people were working like three, 4 jobs apiece among my aunts and uncles to try and get me an opportunity to get a good education. And about 1990, I got to work with a man from South Africa who was in exile under apartheid. And the lessons I learned from him about what the ANC wanted to put together just changed my life, changed my whole worldview. And so I went off to college and I was like dedicated. I was like, yo, we got to change the economics within black communities. And it's got to start with the ending of hoarding and segregation within white communities. So I did all that. And then I went on to grad school after having some success with breaking some of those barriers. And I actually did my grad project looking back at the community where I grew up, and everybody had been removed. Everybody, like it was 90% of the community had been destroyed and built over, and I couldn't understand how that had happened so quickly until I started researching the real estate and the urban planning process, and then I saw that when I was small, like 15 years earlier, they had started planning for my community's destruction, and they had started kind of framing, okay, who was going to get what loan and what lots were going to get put in, like dragged under first. And so that was strategy. It was state policy that made that happen. And once I understood kind of the market forces as well as like the political coalitions that drove it, that's what made me get really deep into urban planning. Because then I was like, oh, these people are deciding 20, 30, 50 years out what's going to happen in lots of different places, not just in the US. Most people that hire me are in China, and China's adopting this stuff to try and rework their economy. And so that's where I got by about, I want to say 97, 98. I was asking the right questions. And then my first and second books focused on it for New Jersey. And then since like 2010, 2009, 2010, I've been working on stuff like this nationally and internationally. And so,
What part of Jersey you from?
oh, the Pine Barrens, a place called Freehold.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
out in the middle of the woods. Don't come out there at night.
They
I
don't
I'm
live
from
there in the
I'm,
middle of the
stand
I'm,
on
night.
my street.
I'm from I'm from Pennsgrove. I know where you from.
You
I know
know
where
that.
you
You
at.
know that.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't
so
go
yeah,
out
I'm
there.
thinking about that. Walter, one of the things that I've always heard talk about, and I want to know, is it still prevalent? Because I remember there's always been this talk about the destruction of our communities and how it was done intentionally. So, in your research, have you found that to be the case as well? Because I'm thinking about like historic Hayti and how the freeway came through that. But I've also heard that that happened in Winston-Salem, that happened in Tulsa, that happened in a number of places. So, it seems like this was done intentionally. So, in your research about urban planning, is that the case that it was done intentionally? And can you elaborate on that for our global audience? Because IBM.TV is a global network, so we've got folks watching from Australia and a number of other places that might not know this story of how that happened.
Yeah, after World War II, the federal government underwrote the expansion of the federal highway system. This is even before Dwight Eisenhower signed the interstate highway legislation in the mid 1950s. But that window from the late 1940s through the early 1970s, Congress basically transferred, hundreds of billions of dollars to create every major kind of 4, 6, 8 lane highway across the United States to facilitate commercial development, to and frankly to make it cheaper to get in and out of suburban communities into urban downtowns. And the cheapest way they could do that was by targeting black owned neighborhoods, which typically had less financial wherewithal to fight back in the court in order to preserve themselves. So the process of going from kind of independent cities with different kinds of ethnic neighborhoods to kind of massive metropolitan areas with all these suburbs and less fortunate people, lower income folks living in the cities, that was very intentional. Federal Reserve underwrote that. The federal government wrote the laws, and then the presidents enforced the policies that the Congress had adopted. Like there was a lot of sustained choice for 50 years that made that go down. And it's just when you go out and you look at smaller black communities out in rural areas, once the suburbs start to get built out and organized, the next cheapest place you can acquire are independent small black towns. And so there's folks in Houston right now, one of the oldest free black communities in the country in Independence Heights. They're fighting against Dallas about a massive highway expansion that's going to plow through and destroy a historic black community. So no, this is entirely intentional. There's nothing accidental. It's like, oh yeah, we just happened to identify all the black communities and kind of target them for urban renewal. Like no, it's part of the plan.
But isn't New York like doing that now? You know,
Brooklyn's
like
going through it. Part of
Brooklyn
the
going.
Bronx now is getting
Yeah,
redeveloped.
yeah. Because like I talked to a lot of my friends from up north. They were like, dude, you come up here now. It ain't like it used to be. So the people that left in the 60s and 70s that didn't want to be around the African American culture, they said, you know what, we need to flip it because what goes around comes around. And like I said, all my friends up north saying, man, you got to see what they're doing, and they pretty much just pushing them out.
Yeah, there's a Netflix movie out right now called Residue that's about that process in DC, about just pushing out as many African Americans as they can from historically black neighborhoods, gentrifying aggressively, and make sure it's young white professionals who get the preference to move in, and they get subsidies to basically revitalize, rehabilitate all the housing stock.
Wow. And one of the things I was curious about and everything is, and I'd like to hear your talk on this as well, Walter, is you had the pleasure of working with the president before the current one that we've got, and I won't say his name, but the president before the current one we've had. So what was that like working with him? And also, a lot of times I find activists in the community we're expecting him to do more than he probably actually could do because of the nature of politics. We know that you've got to actually play the game and things of that nature. So I know a number of folks that expected him to come in and basically shake up the whole system and everything. But I was not of the opinion that he could do everything. And I know there were some things that were done, like the drone attacks, that folks did not necessarily appreciate. But I just love to hear your perception of working with Obama and what it was like working with him, and also your message to the activists that might not have, that might have been disappointed by the what they wanted to have accomplished that wasn't accomplished.
Yeah, no. So I want to be clear. I was never in the same room. I wish to hang out with some of those folk, but no. Like it was my research that was built on a lot of the things that went into the revitalization and got implemented by Julian Castro. Was really the highest end involvement I saw, and so that work was so valuable. It really rebuilt the world and the not just American economy but the world economy from 2009 forward, and so I'm tremendously proud of it. But at the same time, like I do see the missed opportunity is that particularly now that we're staring down the barrel of this election and this recent Supreme Court justice passing away at the most inopportune moment. I look back at that decision to go after healthcare in late 2009, and then that fight that cost Obama the Congress in 2010 is just absolutely devastating. Is that there is so much more work he could have accomplished with a friendlier Congress, and you probably don't get Mitch McConnell as the Senate
Right.
Majority Leader in 2014 if there had been kind of a different approach to healthcare. And so I see it's an enormously valuable piece of legislation, but the cost is just so massive in terms of the backlash that he faced from 2010 to 2020. And now, folks are seeming like they're going to get to the election and regret the fact that they made those decisions. People forget about John Boehner in charge of the House. Like there was just a dramatic reversal against anything democratic because he was president, and that has set us back. That has built the framework for what we're living with today. And so it's going to be in the best case 10 or 12 years trying to rebuild, from this. I'm looking at an agenda if Biden manages to win. You're talking about you got to restore the Voting Rights Act. You got to put public campaign finance laws in place to undo Citizens United. You got to basically reverse the Trump tax law of 2017. So there's actual revenues coming into state and level and federal government. And that's before you even get started on the corruption and starting to look for all the people who shouldn't be in office who are stealing. Like there's just so much work to do in the next 2 years. And that's if we manage to get through November 3rd. So I am tremendously proud of the Obama administration in so many ways, but I also see the frustration because I see they could have chosen different paths, especially with initiatives like empowering, like not empowering young black males, but My Brother's Keeper. Um, that could have been just a much stronger and much bolder initiative, but like he had to make compromises. And ultimately, I'll say this: the nature of a president, any president, is to exercise military power. And so if you're expecting somebody to go in there and be Martin Luther King and essentially campaign for the end of war, like that's not an American president. Like it's not in the 20th century, not in the 21st century. That job is a sword. It's in control of a massive military arsenal. And he had a chance. He actually tried to reduce the amount of funding going into the military, and he balanced the budget and came close to balancing the budget because he did that. But if you want those kind of results that you had imagined for the Obama administration, you've got to have an Obama Congress. You've got to have a Congress of basically people like Ocasio-Cortez. You got to have, Bernie Sanders be the Senate Majority Leader. Like it's that Congress that's going to lead to those kind of values. That it's not going to be just the president pushing against the Supreme Court and the Congress.
Yep, yep, I can understand that. And you're right. We got to get those kind of folks out there. You mentioned RBG, and I know that a lot of folks are also reflecting on her loss and this new Supreme Court judge that has been nominated, or the new nominee. So I'd love to hear both of y'all's reflections on RBG's legacy as well as what you think of the current nominee. So I'll turn it over to you first, Larry, and then I'll come down to Walter. But what are your thoughts on RBG?
Well, I just watched a movie that her and her when they fought for, was it equal right pay for women? And I just watched that movie with her and her husband, and it for a lady at that age and that young, and they were just basically discriminating on her because she was a woman, and for what she went through and what she did, that itself makes her great. And how she stood up against those, even on the Supreme Court with her, about equal rights, not for just people just for women, period. And I think this women movement owes her a great debt of gratitude because she stuck her neck out and she won. Now the lady that they got coming in, what little bit I read about her, it's another Trump. It's another Trumper. You know what I mean? But the worst thing about it, and I'm gonna end with this, he have became president at the right time and the wrong time. The right time is he got all his people in that he wanted it. But the wrong thing about it was all the people he got in, they failing and they falling and they just, most everybody in his cabinet is either in jail or went to court or in court. So what that tell you about the type of people we dealing with? So, but far as her, I'm a big fan of hers.
Yeah. What about yourself, Walter?
Yeah, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg really short of Thurgood Marshall, and I would say probably from what I've seen so far of Sonia Sotomayor, she really opened up a lot of doors for folks to have greater degree of freedom. I mean, there are shortcomings. There are ways that she empowered the federal government to not respect everybody's rights and let some things go with like detainees or treatment of prisoners and things that I would disagree with. But I had a colleague really go in and critique her for not hiring, a number of African American clerks. She kind of did not bring more Black people into the circle of being eligible to get federal appointments, and so that's a shortcoming. But I mean, we see that from almost every white employer that they don't hire as many African Americans as they should that are qualified. So I have a hard time breaking out and giving her problems over that. Certainly, in contrast to the new nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. Um, when you look through her career and the fact she's only been on the federal bench for 3 years is that, she has not demonstrated the career to be prepared and ascend to the Supreme Court at this point. Um, it's a lack of qualifications. It reminds me a lot of the Clarence Thomas nomination, that she's being nominated because she's a woman who doesn't believe in traditional feminism and women's rights. So it's like taking a Clarence Thomas who doesn't share any of Thurgood Marshall's values and putting him in there to undo Thurgood Marshall's work. Barrett is a candidate designed to come in and undermine Ginsburg's attempt to
Ginsburg.
make the society more open for women. And, it's the type of thing that I hope there are a few sane people that will say, no, the next president should make this selection. And we get a legitimate process. And in fact, if she's appointed, I see it very much like the previous two nominees, is that there has to be an investigation into their compromises and they may be impeached and removed. So that's the kind of thing that, it's indicative of the corruption that we've suffered for the last 4 years.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And you might answer this. When Obama wasn't president, wasn't there someone up that he was trying to like they were trying to nominate, but they came up with a way to push that back until Trump got into office? Was that because of the Senate?
Yeah, that's because Mitch McConnell was in charge of the Senate. And that's one of the most disgusting displays you'll ever see in the federal government is Mitch McConnell went up to Obama, who had this legitimate nominee, who was a Republican and very moderate, and said, yeah, with great pleasure, I tell you, you will not fill this Supreme Court seat, and just defied the president and undermined him, in a way that he felt like he could do because Barack Obama was Black. Right. Even if it had been Joe Biden in that office, he would not have done the same thing. It was his zest because he wanted to insult the first Black president that happened. And so Merrick Garland's nomination was never heard. It was never taken to committee. And then as a result, Trump was able to get his first nominee after he took office.
And the only reason I answer that question, I just want people to understand what Obama went to opposed to what Trump and Mitch McConnell was doing.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot of that going on. I want to bring in one other guest, and this is actually a young lady from UNC, so I want to get her perception as well. So, Madison, glad that you were able to join us and everything. And I know that you were backstage listening to some of the conversation and everything. So, Madison is in UNC and has definitely been involved in a number of things around media, and is definitely a member of the UNC Daily Tar Heel, so a newspaper that is over there at UNC, and she's also works with me at WCOM, so has done radio and newspaper. And was wondering your thoughts on the world that we live in now, and maybe your thoughts on RBG, and then we can also talk about some of the other things that are happening in the world. But I'd love to hear your perception of what you thought of RBG and her legacy as a judge.
Definitely. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure to be here and also just to listen to your insights. They're incredible. You guys have done some amazing work, so I really appreciate listening to that. I was very, very, very sad when RBG died. Like was such an incredible lady. She opened the door for so many people. Obviously, she wasn't perfect, and she also made some decisions that I personally don't agree with. But I think just overall, her passing is just devastating, especially like at this crucial time when we're coming up on a new election cycle, and I don't think that Trump has the best interest for like anyone in mind when they're going to nominate a new justice. So I was very sad.
Yeah, definitely. I can understand that and everything. I was wondering what some of your thoughts were, Madison, in regards to like some of the things that we're seeing in terms of relations, both in terms of gender relations and race relations. Because I know that, like I said, you're at UNC and you've definitely seen that, the protests and everything that are happening on campus. So I'd just like to know your perception as a young lady and a young student.
I think a lot of students were just very upset as well. I saw, the protest for her and like the march to honor her life around Chapel Hill's campus, and I thought that was incredible. Like the outpouring of support that there was. UNC is a very liberal campus, which I love, and so all of my friends and peers were also very upset at her death. I think women in particular, because like even though the potential nominee is a woman, she does not have the best interest of women in mind, and he has made a lot of very controversial and potentially very harmful statements. So, but I just loved all the support for UNC for her death.
Thanks. Definitely a lot going on there and everything. Walter, for folks that are actually, like Madison's age that want to get into urban planning and things of that nature, what kind of advice would you give them if they wanted to go into that? I know she's more interested in media, but say she's got friends, because I know she lives in a sorority house that want to get into urban planning. What kind of advice would you give them in order to get into that field?
No, there's a lot of advice, even for media. I would say, doing shows like this, getting your own Medium channel where you write and getting some video experience, this kind of work, it's just wide open right now. And so there's such great opportunities. So on media, I would say produce your own stuff. You see with YouTubers how that takes off, and particularly Instagram, Snapchat, there's just enormous opportunity. So on the media side, that's one route. But then when you come to urban planning, I represent an organization called the Society for American City and Regional Planning History, and it's just a pipeline. It's once you're interested as an undergrad in those questions, you read the journal that we produce. A lot of faculty will help you kind of break down what an area needs and how you can make better decisions about public policy. And then you publish an article, you start to come to the conference, all of a sudden you're at a major university with a full scholarship and doing advanced research in somebody's lab. And then a couple of years later, you got your degree, you get in tenure. Like that work of just finding somebody who believes in your vision. I have a colleague down at the University of South Carolina who I met when she was an undergrad at Purdue University. And it's just you having a good mentor, somebody who's looking out for you, telling you the next step on the path. And that opens up a door where all of a sudden just unbelievable things happen. And I get to be on shows like this because of people looking out and paying attention to what's going on. So, some of my colleagues, they're on Good Morning America. Guys are getting interviewed by the New York Times every week. So, there's just extraordinary opportunity. Believe in the dream, find a good mentor, and everything falls into place far faster than you could ever think.
That's nice. I appreciate it.
Can I ask Walter a question?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there listening. But listen, how important is it for because I go to the planning meetings here sometime in Greensboro, and you don't see a lot of us on the planning committees. And how important is it for us to really be part of that conversation? And how, when we try to become part of that conversation, our conversation becomes relevant?
Yeah, so you got to roll with numbers. You got to roll with numbers coming in there. So like even if one or two people get elected to the board, you need to have like 4 or 5 people who are regular attendees who are checking the agenda and looking at the process. Because even when you get like 1 or 2 people who go in there and are attending, all of a sudden the board will call itself into executive session and then do some things behind closed doors, come back out, just kind of rap the hammer on the table, be like, oh, the agenda is accepted, next, and you never heard the business that was actually going down. So getting elected to the board is one thing. Then being in attendance where you have a whole committee of folks who is pay attention to the details and looking at the long-term picture. Once you start doing that, once you have a committed group that's sitting there every time the meeting is, then all of a sudden the tone of the conversation starts to change and
Conversation
become more
changes.
accountable.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
along those same lines, I was wondering, actually, Larry brings up a good point. I know that on this show, as well as other shows that have been on this network, we've talked about the importance of local elections. And I do agree with Larry that a lot of times we don't pay enough attention to the planning commissions, to the soil and water commissions, to a number of those other commissions. But at the end of the day, it's those jobs that actually make the decisions that impact us more directly than say some of the decisions that the president and I would even argue the governor makes. So, how do you try to encourage people to get involved on those planning commissions and on that local level in terms of the electoral situations? Because I do know that most cities do have a planning commission, but I don't know that, as Larry said, enough of us are actually engaged in trying to become members of those commissions.
Yeah, for me, it's quarterly recruitment meetings. And so you go out and you're in church, you're in the nonprofits, you're meeting people who, at different stages of life, who have different kinds of issues that they're facing within their house. And you say, oh, no, you got something really important to say. You need to come in here and meet at this meeting and be a part of this. And as you go out, and, for me, doing stuff all over the place all the time, I can't be everywhere I want to be as often as I like. I always need help. And so whenever I can identify folks who are ready to step up and ready to take action, then I'm just like, yeah, I'm with you. This is the next piece we're going to do. And we find a way that it's easy for them, that it might just be being on a phone call. It might be in a Zoom. It could be any number of things, but like just every individual, I try to spend every day finding one or two people that I can connect with, that I get them an opportunity that they didn't know about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Madison, along those same lines, how many of the students there at UNC actually are even aware of, say, the city council, or in your mind, the city council and some of the other offices that exist there in Chapel Hill, or are they even paying attention to those local politicians and some of those commissions?
Definitely not nearly enough. I think a lot of students they're aware of it potentially like at their hometowns, but like since they're coming in from other places around the state, even though they're voting in Chapel Hill, I think a lot of people aren't aware of some of the local elections that are going on. And I think I know a lot of people that are just kind of like going down the ballot for those, essentially, like getting the flyers before from different parties and voting based off that rather than being able to like research and learn more about each particular candidate beforehand, which is very disappointing because they have a lot of power to influence a lot of different things in the area.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to hear both of y'all, all three of you, talk about how y'all are dealing with the pandemic. And I'll start with you, Madison. But how are things going there in UNC, and what kind of methods are you doing? Like I said, I know that you're in the sorority house, but you definitely are trying to stay socially distanced and all of that. But how are you managing to do that?
It was a big change. I mean, last year we got sent home right after spring break and then did online school. So doing online school again this year wasn't that much of a change, but just going back and then being sent home after a week was just very frustrating. I think the school just completely mishandled the situation, and we got a lot of really bad national attention, which is very disappointing to have that kind of tarnish for something that could have been easily avoided by, waiting or just not going back. UNC dorms are actually considered by the CDC to be the highest risk level because they were just full capacity. People were in, they had roommates, they had suite mates, like shared bathroom spaces, shared elevators. So I know so many people that have had coronavirus, and I actually waited to move into my housing because I was like, okay, it's 40 girls in one place, and I know there's going to be like right when everyone comes back, big cluster. So I was very glad that I didn't because both of my roommates actually ended up getting coronavirus. So I avoided it, but there was just a lot of people getting it. The cluster notifications every day were it's like, okay, it's 4 p.m. Time to see which dorm has it now.
Wow. What about you, Walter? How are you dealing with it in your office environment and where you are at? So how are you coping with the virus as we're dealing with this global pandemic?
Yeah, so it was rough in Jersey up until like mid-May, but then the numbers starting to flatten out, and it's been okay. But my campus is right, so like from Memorial Day up until Labor Day, it was nutty. Like you could not be anywhere really near here, and my particular job almost required that I was here daily, and so it was really hard, like trying to manage the administrative workload through the summer. We produce a lot of doctoral students, and they all need help getting through the summer courses. So that was tough. And at the end of it, now that I'm into September, the big deal is both my two sons are studying from home. My wife is a sixth grade teacher, so she's got to deal with some real kind of difficult questions about wearing masks and protecting herself in her school environment. And it's just rough being in an educational setting where you have to socially distance, you have to wear your masks. But thankfully, to this point, it's been almost a month since we had a partial reopening of campus with a lot of social controls, and there has not been a major outbreak on our campus. So thank goodness. And my family has avoided any real. Well, I shouldn't say we've had three people pass away in the last like 6 7 months, but for the most part, the folks who weren't at risk did not catch and have not gotten sick and had been hospitalized. So I try to be very thankful.
That's very good. Well, 'cause like I said, you're a filmmaker, and I know it's hard to make a film when you have to do social distancing and wearing the mask and things of that nature. So, how are you actually even managing to make these films? Because you've made two that you've talked about. You talked about the one that was kind of like the Foxy Brown kind of theme, and then the one,
Yeah.
the trial and
Well,
everything.
the one we working on now, the trial film, we kind of in like the waiting stage because I had the courtroom in Greensboro, but they shut the courts down, so we waiting for that. But we have been preparing. I'm actually working on building a set for our trial. We practicing the social distancing, and another thing I'm doing with my actors, we're camera angles is everything in film. So we're really working on putting our shot list together on our angles, far as dealing with the being 6 feet apart and everything like that. So long as we get that right, I think we're gonna be okay. But we're planning on start production in the middle of next month. It's a and it's like a 2 day shoot because it's a trial, it's all in one location. So all praise due to Allah, we can go ahead and get that done. And have to invite you and Madison and Mr. Greason. I'll send y'all the link to the film when we premiere it because I'm telling people this film deals with everything that America doesn't really want to deal with. And I told somebody, listen, I'm gonna leave it alone. This isn't one of them films that's going to be compromised because I'm an independent filmmaker and I can do what I want. So before I have to sell my soul to the devil, which is the industry, we're going to get this film shot and let people see why black people are definitely due reparation.
Yes,
Sounds like
sir.
this film could be something very similar to another film that was along those lines as well. And I know Mr. Greason will know this reference. Madison may not, but it sounds to me like you're definitely doing something very similar to the movie called The Spook That Sat by the Door, where Ivan Dixon did a lot of that kind of
Yeah,
guerrilla work and definitely got a message about race relations at that particular time. So I'm sure that you're familiar with that movie, Larry, and have probably even used that
yeah.
movie as a
That's
framework for what you're doing.
and I'm gonna close with this. And I'm doing this movie for one reason and one reason only. So we don't be the whipped, hung, oppressed, and suppressed slaves in the film. This film was about us addressing America in a courtroom setting where we're allowed to say, "Hey, we can win this," and that's why I'm doing it. And that's and plus to educate people. This is probably going to be the most Googled film in the history of film because the information we putting out there, people going to have to look it up.
Nice.
Sounds like there's going to be a lot of great information. If folks are interested in knowing how they can learn more about the film, what is the website where they can find the information about you and the film at?
Okay, well, you can go to all you gotta do is go to my Facebook, Larry Saeed, right? And you can go that got all my information. And then I have my web page called The Bill is Past Due. But if you go to Larry Saeed, right, it give you all the information about the film and what we're doing. And we're also, trying to raise some money for the production. And so if you anybody looking to become an executive producer or producer, I got a good package for them where it is because this film, when we show this film, man, it's gonna definitely educate not just black people. It's gonna educate all people to understand why black people are why we think the way we think, and and people have to get out of that. Once they stop looking at us and treating us like second class citizens and look at us as citizens, that's when things is going to change for us. That's when things are going to change.
That makes a lot of sense, and hopefully, folks will learn more about that and everything. Walter, if you would tell us a little bit about the books that you've got going on, and share where they can find those books, because you've done some great research. Like I said, I was glad to meet you through the street and everything, but I'd love to hear about the books and where folks can learn more about these books at.
Yeah, so I'm blessed that I've been able to either write or edit 6 books in my relatively short career, plus another 3 I was a lead contributor on. So that's 9 that's out there. You can find them all at my website. So www.walterdgrayson. David's my middle name, so Walter D. Grayson at .com. If you go there, you can just subscribe. There's all links to all the books, film projects. The thing I'm most excited about is August 1st, we dropped a new video game. And so it's a video game about exploring Black history, touring through communities like Savannah, Georgia, Lower Manhattan, New York, historic Philadelphia back in the early 1800s. And so you get to see Black history as it unfolded, and get to learn about a lot of the stuff that's like before the Black Panther movie, like Afrofuturism. Where did all those kinds of influences come? So if you like things like Lovecraft Country was very much similar to the video game last night, or what was this show that just won the Emmy? Watchmen. If you saw that on HBO, like that's what the video game is basically like. You can go and have your own kind of small entertainment experience and learn a couple things. Oh, the title of the game is Sojourner's Trail. If you want a link, just go through my website. You'll be able to get the link.
Well, we're definitely going to get that on this station as well, because one of the shows we do on Thursday is a show called Gamers Den, where we actually talk to gamers around the world. My friend Jatovia McDuffie is actually one of the host of that show, along with myself and a number of others. But we've had some gamers come throughout the world. I know we've had some from India, we've had some from California, North Carolina. So definitely I'll have to bring that to Jatovi's attention, and we'll have to pull it up so that we can show that during that time as well. So definitely I think folks will be engaged in that conversation and learn a lot that way. I know that on Tuesday, I mentioned it earlier, we've got that big debate coming up, and I just want to know what folks' reflections are, what they're going to be looking for in the debate, and what kind of answers they're going to be expecting and what they expect from the debate. So I'll defer to the ladies first. So Madison, the debate is tomorrow. What are you expecting to hear, and what are you looking for?
I'm excited to watch it. Our housemates and I are all watching it together. I have made up my mind about who I'm going to vote for, so their answers they give won't impact my decision. But I think it's just going to be interesting to. I think first of all, it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to do a political debate in the pandemic. I think it's going to have a very weird feel, perhaps, with no one being there to watch like there normally is. And I think one aspect that Trump had the last debate cycle was he would get a very intense audience reaction. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he is dealing with not being able to have that. But I'm just interesting to see how they discuss issues like the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, things like that.
And what about you, Walter? What are you expecting from the debate? What are you going to be looking for? I'm thinking that you may have already had your mind made up as well, but what are you going to be looking for in the debate?
No, I'm still very on the fence. No, come on now. This is going to be. I'm most interested in the tone between the two candidates. So the president's made his career on making kind of vicious attacks and shocking people with his ways that he violates political norms. I don't know how his challenger, I don't know how the Vice President Biden is going to try and counter that. He's a much more substantive, experienced kind of statesman, traditional politician. So it's the styles that clash that I'm watching, and then kind of I do expect that there's going to be pretty significant online engagement, so that the ways that people interface with it through social media, and the way that they're not going to be crowd roars and boos and those things in the same way, but there's going to be immediate kind of viral reactions on different social platforms. So I'm going to watch that very carefully.
And what about you, Larry? What are you going to be looking for in the debate, and what are you expecting to come at it from your standpoint?
It's going to be, if I was looking at this like from the black perspective, it's going to be the hood versus some um some uppity class white person. Because Trump going straight hood. I'm telling you, Trump going straight hood. Biden going to be this reserved white guy with the white privilege type of mentality, but Trump going straight hood. And the thing about what I see is Trump going to base his whole argument on the economy or what he did before the corona. That's going to be his argument. You know what I mean? And then, but on the flip side of that, Biden has to really challenge his government on how many people went to jail, what has he done for the community, and the things that he's doing that are off script where even his own party doesn't, agree with what he's doing. So if Biden don't attack them things, I think Trump going to really dig in on them.
That actually raises an interesting question, and I'm curious to hear what all three of you have to say about this. The virus is definitely still out there. There's talk of a vaccine. There's talks of things of this nature. Are y'all thinking that a vaccine is the way to go? If the vaccine comes, will you take the vaccine? So I
I
want
ain't
to
take,
start, Larry.
I ain't
So you,
taking.
Larry, then
Listen,
I'll come down to Walter.
I ain't taking. Listen, my mom told me a long time ago, if you can't read it, don't take it. If you're not educated on it, don't take it. Don't mess with it. So I never took the flu shot anyway, because being the person that I am, a follower of Islam, we don't believe in putting germs in our body. So you can't kill a germ with a germ. You know what I mean? You can try to contain a germ with a germ, but you can't kill a germ with a germ. So I'm not even going that route.
What about you, Walter? Are you going to take it if a vaccine is created, or how are you going to go about it if something should come our way?
So my family is strongly grounded in holistic homeopathic health, and so there's a lot of really good results from taking vitamin D and zinc that you can get. If it got to the place where everything was shut down and folks were getting wild infections all around me, I might reconsider, but I am going to try and ride as long as possible without taking an experimental vaccine.
And what about you, Madison? You're the youngest of the crowd, so if you're the one that a lot of times folks, when they think of the youth, they think that they can't be as impacted because of the ways that youth are being impacted. But as you just said, you've had a number of your students that have been impacted. It might not be as life-threatening to them, but they did have the coronavirus. So what is your thoughts on that?
I think if a vaccine were made available, I think I would take it, but I would not want to be in the first groups of people that take it, just because you don't know the long-term effects of it. Obviously, if it was effective and didn't really have side effects, like that would be amazing, because coronavirus does pose a lot of potential long-term health effects, even for young people who think that they're healthy. They're doing studies where it can harm lung and heart health. So I would like to avoid that. But again, I wouldn't want to be in the first group. I know in Russia they have a vaccine out now, and they gave it to all the frontline medical workers. So it makes me pretty nervous because if something were to happen to go wrong with that, I think that could be an even bigger problem for those people if, the doctors and nurses are out of commission. But yeah.
Now we talking about Russia now. We don't, that could be propaganda.
But yeah, so I was a little questioning that when they
That's very true. It could be. But Madison, coming back to you and everything, what are the number one things that you are hearing from your students and fellow students about the issues that they are most concerned about? Because I know that you were on the ground, you're with the newspaper there. So when you're talking to your fellow students, what are some of the things that they are most concerned about as the world in general?
Oh, the world in general, I think a lot of students are not as concerned about the pandemic as they should be. I know there's a lot of people who have been avoiding the social distancing guidelines and still going out and all that. So I don't think that's the top of a lot of people's minds right now. I think definitely the Black Lives Matter movement, and then the recent protest, and then the fact that Breonna Taylor's murderers were not convicted other than for misfiring I think that has been a really big issue. Just a lot of my friends have been going to the protests. There's been a lot of just outrage about what's happening today because it's terrible. So I think that's probably the main.
All right. And what about where you are, Walter? You're at a academic setting as well. So, what kind of things are you seeing from your students as well as your fellow faculty as what they are most concerned about and what you think that they will be paying the most attention to?
Ooh, boy, you asked the question. My school is quite conservative, so the students actually like this area is in one of the highest points of support for the president, and so those kinds of conversations are not happening amongst the student body. It's much more, the deception of the liberal media and how important it is to get this new justice confirmed. Like there's just a lot of stuff that's the opposite of like they don't settle for Fox News around here. They're folks who watch OAN and that's all they want to see. And so no, the conversations there are Black Lives Matters groups, but man, like it's hard because folks give them a hard time wherever they show up. I'll tell you, the day after the last election, I just walked through the grocery store with my son, and like there was people with red hats banging their shopping carts into ours, telling us get out the store. So, yeah, it is a very very different kind of community around here, and trying just to raise any kind of critical reasoning is very difficult.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you before I get to Larry is how do you cope with that? Because, like I said, I know you as being somebody that's fairly, I would say, liberal to moderate, moderate to liberal. But how do you cope with being in a relatively conservative environment if the students are actually giving you that counter argument on the constant basis, and you're probably trying to like persuade them to your way of thinking? So, how do you even deal with that?
Yeah, so somebody raised this question last week with me is do you try and persuade the students to kind of what you think? And it's like, no, that's not a good use of my time because I start coming out with my own opinions and it just makes it an us versus them kind of thing. One of my best techniques is I'm better at their argument than they are, and then I can walk them down the line of reasoning to conclusions that they haven't reached yet. And as I get further and further down the line of reasoning, more and more of them peel off and be like, that's not really me. And so it starts to be about kind of how they've gotten to the current position they're in. How do they start to kind of develop their own independent opinions and not just fall into what they're fed by either their families or the media? And that works really well for me. That only the folks who are most committed to really not even conservative, but radical right positions where they don't want to hear any kind of conversation. Those are the only folks who just can't entertain kind of how to think more broadly about stuff.
And what about you, Larry, in your environment and in the communities that you're at? How do you engage folks that might think differently? And also, what is folks thinking in general in your community?
Well, it's like I just think people the people that I deal with, they thinking like from an individual standpoint. They really actually, everybody as far as running locally here, they really kind of do. They reading up and questioning them on, what they say they're gonna do. They question them. They read up. So I don't think the people that I deal with gonna do just straight ticket. They're gonna pick the people that they feel is best for the job. You know what I mean? And then now, as far as Trump and far as Biden, I don't really even try to get into that conversation with anybody because it always turns into some type of disagreement. So I'm not going to argue with nobody to disagree and disagree. So I just say, hey, do you? And whatever happens, and you're either going to fail from it or you're going to prosper from it. So I don't really get into that. My thing is more local elections when they come around and stuff like that, because that's what's more important to me because Greensboro is my home. But the presidential thing is not really after what they did the last election, when they talking about the 13 colonies, the 13, and that's where he won, and he lost her, and she lost because of that. I just think that just blew me away from wanting to even be part of that part of that election.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, because there are a lot of electoral questions. I know a lot of folks have been concerned about it. Some of them come down to things around urban planning and things of that nature. So I was just wondering, I'll talk with you, Walter, when it comes to the folks in that vote the PACs or the political action committees and vote that kind of straight ticket kind of philosophy, or even try to like vote according to the electoral college, because I think that's also based on urban planning as well, at least the way it's structured now. So excuse me, what are some of your thoughts on that and everything? Because I do know that that is a very big issue in this election, the whole thing of the electoral college.
Yeah, between the Senate and the Electoral College, you've got some really huge distortions in our federal representation, in that you have, almost two-thirds of the Senate seats representing more land than they represent people. And so that problem is going to continue to get worse, especially with some of the distortions in the 2020 census. And so trying to find a way where we rebalance how actual people are represented, not just in the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate. And certainly, I am not in favor of the Electoral College. The fact that we've had so many close elections that kind of has the Electoral College go against the popular vote speaks to me the fact that it's no longer really useful, if it ever was. I have doubts about that as well. But no, the larger piece for me is, if you were to make DC a state, if Puerto Rico were to become a state, it'd go a long way towards making sure you have a more functional Senate, a Senate that is not so heavily partisan. And I think there are ways you could actually stop the kind of gerrymandering that you see in Wisconsin, where if Democrats were going to try and win a majority in their state legislature, they have to win almost 70% of the votes. And so even if they win 51%, they won't control the state
You know what I mean?
legislature. Those kinds of things just they're undemocratic, and they don't serve the people of Wisconsin. So those kinds of problems. I think in North Carolina, Virginia, you have similar kind of gerrymandered districts that have had to be fought out in court. Pennsylvania's had them as well. Those kinds of problems we can't tolerate.
And what kind of ways do you think folks can fight that gerrymandering? Because I agree that gerrymandering has been a big issue here in North Carolina, South Carolina, and a number of Virginia, a number of other southern states, and still continues to be a problem. So, Walter, what are some of the ways that the community at large can fight that gerrymandering issue?
So local and state level, you want to be in touch with your League of Women Voters, your AC American Civil Liberties Union. They're the ones who take point. The NAACP, they will challenge the state legislature and get them into the state Supreme Court, where these kinds of illegal districting lines will be thrown out. But in a bigger level, when I talked about revitalizing the Voting Rights Act as the number one priority, that's exactly what I'm pointing at, is that the Congress taking action to re-empower the Attorney General to impose sanctions against states that violate voting rights protections, that will end a lot of this redistricting nonsense.
And Madison, are you hearing a lot of folks talk about gerrymandering and the Electoral College among your students? And if so, what kind of ways are they feeling impacted by it, and what are their thoughts as you're hearing from some of your fellow students?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really big topic. I'm a double major in journalism and political science. Actually, this week we had to do a paper about gerrymandering. And I mean, just like in 2012 in North Carolina, it was like over half of people voted for Democratic candidates, but then Democrats severely like lost the seat. So I think it's just terrible in North Carolina. I'm from one of the most conservative counties in North Carolina, which is Brunswick County. And we are pretty heavily gerrymandered as well. So a lot of people are just talking about it, and just how, because I mean, Chapel Hill is a very liberal place, but then like when you go outside of the Triangle area, it's significantly less so. So a lot of people are very worried about the impact that has on the election, since, the Electoral College exists and makes for some very unfair elections.
Yeah.
Definitely. And we'll continue this conversation for at least a few more minutes and everything. But I know, Walter, you've got to bounce off and everything very shortly. But one of the things I always do at the end of the show, of all the shows, is I try to get people to give a word of encouragement. There's so many things that are happening in the world, whether it's the economic folks are facing, whether it's the BLM movement, whether it's Me Too, whether it's a number of other things. So, if any words of encouragement that you can give to our audiences that are around the globe that can be encouraging to them, that's your opportunity to do that now. So I'd love to hear your words of encouragement to folks that are out there that are struggling with all of these things that we are facing.
Every day, do a little bit of physical exercise, whether it's yoga, meditation, stretching, something that you get out and make your body feel good as early in the day as you can. And then extend that good feeling you get to somebody that you interact with that day, particularly somebody who doesn't feel so good, who might be struggling with something. Try to do a little something to add a little light, even if it's just an email, could be a quick phone call or a text message. That's the best thing you can do, man. Keep yourself feeling as good as you can, and then extend that good feeling to the people around you.
I definitely appreciate you joining me, Walter. I know we've been talking about it for a while, and I definitely want to engage in this conversation. Like I said, you definitely brought up a lot of very powerful points, and I definitely was glad to get your insight. Like I said, every time that I see you on Tree Show or a number of other ones, I know that you have these great insights. So I was glad that you were able to share it with our audience as well, and know that you are always welcome back.
Brother Saeed, Sister Ward, it was a joy to be on with you, Mark. This is spectacular. Anytime I come back, I'd love it.
And Walt, I'm gonna reach out to you too.
Yeah, hit me. Come on, let me know. Same thing.
Yeah.
Just
Thank
reach
you. I
out.
really appreciate that. I learned some things today about the urban and the jury mandarin. Like I said, I really didn't know, and I really didn't know about that. I just know that I always question these zoning boards committees and stuff like that because they always like in Greensboro, you know, they're always making these shifts to make it seem like one, which is probably part of jury mandarin, make give one party a stronger hold on the community than the other party. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
All right, do the same. Definitely look forward to seeing Walter on another show and everything. I'm actually going to try a little bit of an experiment here because I know that Madison is very much engaged in the media and things of that nature. I need to get me a cup of water, so I'm going to remove myself and I'm going to let Madison interview Larry. Larry, the filmmaker, meet Madison, the reporter. So if she will
How
engage
you?
me in a little bit of conversation while I get me some water, and then I'll come back. But I'll let y'all interview each other for a while. So I'm going to let Madison talk to you about the filmmaking. Just to give it some context, he's got a film about, and I know you were listening backstage, but one of the films is about reparations, but done in a fictional jury kind of environment. And then he also did a film that was more along the lines of like Foxy Brown and some of the other things that are the old-fashioned blaxploitation kind of movies, but it was his way of honoring those movies, but also honoring the women in those movies because there were a number of women that were not always getting the highlight when we had like Black Panther and some of the other movies. So I'm going to go get me a glass of water. I'm going to remove myself, and I'm going to let Madison interview Larry.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, Madison, you're a journalist.
I am an aspiring one.
Okay, well, that's good. So now I will introduce myself to you right quick. My name is Larry Saeed. I'm the owner of Fishbone Entertainment, co-creator of a program called Paper to Film, where we teach young men and young women how to become filmmakers, screenwriters, and journalists. And we've been doing that since 2013 here in Greensboro. And I'm currently working on a film called We're Coming to Get Our Check, and we're taking America in front of the world court.
When will this be released?
Well, the plan is to release it on Martin Luther King's birthday, January the 15th, 2021.
That's
So,
exciting. It's coming up
yes,
soon.
yes, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, how far are you along in the process of completing it?
Well, the script is written, and we was hoping to be done with the film by now because it was originally scheduled to be produced in September, but when the COVID kicked in, we they shut the courthouse down in Greensboro, and the courthouse that I had was apparently without a courthouse. But our goal is to start production in the middle of October because I'm having a set built.
Okay, I think that's a very doable time frame.
Yeah.
Where are you building the set in Greensboro?
Yeah, I got a spot there where I've got some open space, and so we'll be building the set. And the funny thing about the film is the makeup of the defense team and the prosecution and the plaintiff. So the defense team is a Jewish, Irish, and a black person. And I did that I've done that for a reason because the Jewish person, the Irish person got some type of reparation. The black guy never got reparation.
Right.
But the black attorney believes that working hard and pulling yourself up by the bootstrap is his reparation.
Do you
get
think
what I'm saying?
Yes, no, that's amazing. That's a very good strategy. Do you think that this potentially, like, I know it should be, but do you think that it will be a real court case one day?
Well, I'll put it to you like this. I hope it do. Now, back in 64, 65, Malcolm X was campaigning to take America in front of the World Court,
Hmm.
but it never got that far. And has it ever happened? I don't know, but I know they have always went in front of Congress and in front of the Senate, whoever, and presented that case.
Hmm.
But our whole thing is we're not presenting. This is what people got to understand. The only way we can take America to court is in front of the World Court or United Nations, because you can't have a state or country prosecuting itself.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yes.
And the beauty of this whole film is like all the information that we're presenting in our case is actual factual information. And what people have to understand is that America's and what's name spoke about this earlier, Mr. Greason. America's defense is pretty much saying that we can't date back how far, and we want to give reparation to African Americans. We can't date back to how far where the reparation should begin. But he made a good point, is that slaves was property. So if you had slaves, you had to pay taxes on your property. So for when they say stuff like that, it's a lie, because they have tax records on everything since taxes that started in this country, and how we was named and stuff like that. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. And so where did you get your sources? Like, how difficult was it to find all the information that you're presenting in the movie?
Well, it's the beauty of the internet and Google and this mass information is
Yes.
all out there. But we as people, sometimes we don't want to do the research. But my best friend, who's an attorney in New Jersey, and he was at one time he was Attorney General for the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he was the ESQ for a college up there. But he's a history buff. That's his thing, history. So we always talked about shooting this film, but when he retired, he said, Saeed, let's put this thing together. So we sat down, and he gave me so much information. What we're filming now is the hearing. I mean, yeah, is the hearing.
Mhm.
But part two is going to be the actual trial. So what we're doing in this film is presenting our case to take it to trial.
Right.
We have like so much information. It's crazy. And that's why I said earlier that this is probably going to be the most Googled film anybody want to see if they want to be educated.
Right.
And so, I think we're doing what I feel though is best for us as a community, and because it's going to educate people, and it's so much that black people, African Americans have been through so much. It's crazy, and it's hurtful when you sit back and read and do your history and see what we went through. And you got the Jewish community got reparation. For World War One, World War Two, whatever. The Japanese community got reparation. Everybody got a reparation except Black America. And the only reason why America doesn't want to give Black America reparation, they will say they will have to say they're fighting the admission of guilt. So if they give us reparation, they saying they're guilty.
Right. It's such an important topic. And like, there's so many ways today that the oh, sorry, my
I hear you. Yeah.
but just like the issues today with discrimination, income inequality, and just education is just terrible. So I think that your movie will have a very strong, like, positive reaction to getting
And,
people
and
aware and involved in this issue.
I think and I'm gonna say this, and people are gonna disagree with me, but I want to explain why I'm saying this. I don't think I think diversity and inclusion is I think diversity and inclusion is kind of is hurting the Black Afro American community, because, and I'm saying this for a reason, because now when we present our case, when we try to sit down at the table and talk to these people, they say, "Well, we're taking care of you people of color." You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
that makes sense.
you get what I'm saying?
I never thought
So,
about it that way.
and I tell people and I'm not saying that I don't believe in the people of color community. I just saying when you're dealing with the African American community, you have to separate us from them other communities because our issue is an African American community issue.
Right. Yeah.
You, you know what I'm saying?
But that makes a lot of sense. It's actually really interesting. I agree. I just never thought about it that way. It's a really
And
good.
so me and my friends have these arguments about that, and And another thing I tell people, everybody come to this country because they went through some type of oppression or suppression
Mhm.
in the countries they came from. So if you come from a country where is you are being treated less worse than a dog, and people hate you because of your religious belief or your color belief. I mean, what color you are. Then when you come to this country, how can you sit there and say that you have an issue with Black Americans and you have went through the same thing we went through? That's why you came here.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just so sad how this country was literally built on oppression and just like first starting off with taking Native American lands and then slave. Like, it's terrible. Like there needs to be something done.
And I was talking to a friend of mine about, and these people educated me because I was talking to him about the riots and protests of the '60s because that has something to do with the African American people, right? It has something to do with us. But the guy said this movement now is more about culture. It's a
Okay.
cultural movement now. And I didn't really understand what he was saying until he broke it down to me because this young culture, your culture, this millennial culture, they don't really feed into this color bullshit. They don't you know what I mean? You got people that don't even consider themselves. It's like a gender thing. Some people that say I'm not male, I'm not female, I'm just a person. You know what I mean? So it's more of a identity movement now where people want to be respected and looked at because of how they identify or who they identify themselves with. Because back when I was coming up, black life in the '60s, the '70s when I was coming up, Black Lives Matter would it being a women organization, and they said they represent the LGBT community. They wouldn't even been able to even march back then just because of our how can I put this? Just because of our I don't want to say ignorance, just because of how we looked at that community back then. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Back again and everything. How Larry? How did Madison do as a interviewer? So did she do
well,
a good job?
I put it to you like I'm kind of educating her, so I didn't really give her a chance to say much. But but as her being a journalist, I was just kind of educating her on some things. Like I told her, like my difference with diversity and inclusion. I really don't believe that Black Americans are part of that diversity and inclusion community because our issue is with Black Americans.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when they say people of color, I don't have a problem with that. But what people are marching down because of stuff that's happening to Black Americans. You know what I mean? And so once they allow once the system allow Black Americans to be looked at as citizens and not second class citizens or 3/1 of a person in the southern states, then we can join that community and say, hey, people of color, because I feel as though we're Black Americans going to get that respect we deserve.
Yeah, that
You
makes a
know.
lot of sense. Madison, from your perspective, how were you raised in terms of like both identifying with race and other things? So you mentioned that you grew up in a relatively conservative town and everything. So did they even talk about race relations when you grew up, or was that something that was taboo? And also, I know a lot of folks are involved in this whole gender politics, whether it's as Larry was talking about, folks identifying as transgender or bi or whatever else. So was that something that was talked about in your family, or was that something that your parents left out in your discussion growing up?
In my family, it was. My parents are very liberal and very well aware and informed of social issues. But I have to say, in my school and education system I grew up in, it was absolutely not. We actually had very huge problems with racism. It actually made national news at my high school. We had one student bring a conservative flag and he waved it around the cafeteria and he started screaming white power, and he was like, just got up on the tables, and the school basically did almost nothing to punish him. He got a couple days of suspension and that was it. And it was like just so sad to see. And just I think a lot of people even were agreeing with him in his stance on the Confederate flag. And I was just so saddened by that, about how people could be so hateful and ignorant. And my family definitely agrees with that as well. But I think it's something like you have to teach in the education system that what is acceptable and is not acceptable, and make people aware of these issues. But
I'm gonna say something, and people are gonna kind of flip on about what I'm about to say. Okay, so we have an issue with the Confederate flag, right? They say the Confederate flag represents, which was in it, part of that Confederate flag. They were fighting to keep their slaves, right? But check this out: when the Blues defeated the Grays, and when the slaves got their 40 acres and a mule, because they got their land. So, and then when the vice president came in under his American flag, he allowed for the Blues to go back and take the land from the slaves and give it back to the Grays. So me as a black person, if I have an issue with the Confederate flag, I have to have an issue with the American flag, because the American flag kind of piggybacked off of what the Confederate flag did and took the land from the slaves and gave it back to the Confederates. You get what I'm saying, though? So we had, so when we talk about the flag thing, I'm from up north. I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you about the history of the Confederate flag, but I can tell you about what happened to Black Americans under the United States of America flag as a whole. So the Confederate flag thing doesn't even really affect me as much as what Black people go through under the American flag, and we go through far more worse than what the Blacks went through under the Confederate flag, because we're still going through it.
Gotcha. What's your perception, Madison, about the whole monuments? Because it's not just the flag, but it's also been the monuments. So when you've seen the monuments go down at Chapel Hill and a number of other places, what were your thoughts on that?
I definitely think it's very, very appropriate to take down the monuments. I think that they're rooted in racial issues. They're racist statues. They're supporting slave owners and people that fought for white supremacy. And I think I was very happy that UNC decided to rename some of the buildings. I think it was like a month and a half ago that were named after those types of people. So I was very happy about that. I mean, Silent Sam was a huge issue at UNC. Unfortunately, I wasn't at UNC yet to witness it, but I think the police definitely mishandled that situation. I think it got a bit more escalated than it needed to be. And I think that I know one of the students who I think they got in a lot of trouble for that. And I think that was very unfair.
And Larry, she mentioned the police and what happened with those protests and everything. We've also seen folks talking about defunding the police or scaling back on police involvement. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something we should be considering, or what are you thinking along those lines?
Well, I don't think, when they see, people get the wrong perception. They say defund the police. I think if you defund the police, you have to take power, control, and authority away from the union. I mean, I think the police should have a union, but I think that the union should be held accountable for the actions of the police if they go in and represent them and they know they're wrong. I think they need. We need law enforcement now. But far as defunding and when I just think that they need to be. I don't want to say retrained. I think they need to be re-educated. You feel what I'm saying? And if that's come with retraining from it, that's fine. But I just think that they have to deal with the unions. And then I had the word, it's called immunity. I forgot the name of the first words, but damn it, I wrote a piece on it. But they have to take this immunity. these thing away from the police where is you can't sue the family. If the cop, I forgot the name of the word, but it pretty much says that if a cop do something and it's with intent, you can sue the family. But being under this immunity, you can't sue the family. So they need to do with that. And I think that would make the cops think more than react because they know their family livelihood is at stake.
Definitely. And Madison, what has been what your thoughts were in regards to the police and this efforts to either defund them or reduce some of their money or to get rid of some of their more high tech weapons? So, what have been some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with those measures because like he was saying, it doesn't mean to actually just get rid of the police. It's to relocate money elsewhere to where they could more effectively and safely serve people. I think there's also just some basic measures that need to be implemented, like banning the use of chokeholds, for example, is what I feel very strongly about. I think better education and them recognizing their biases, whether they're implicit or not, because I think the use of just weapons is way too common, leads to so many innocent people being murdered. And I think they also need to better accountability for their actions. I think that would hopefully help reduce some of the just hundreds and hundreds of deaths that we see in America for basically no reason.
Mm-hmm. And
Definitely.
the word
Go ahead,
and the
Larry.
word I was trying to use is called qualified immunity.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have to deal with that so cops can be held more accountable as an individual. You know what I mean? So that's the word I was talking about.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Madison, as a young woman, I know another issue that's very much important to even some of the founders of this particular network has been around gender and around the ways that women are treated. So, as a young woman, how do you feel about the way that women are treated in modern society? Because I know that that has also been a big issue that women are sometimes felt that they are suffering from different kinds of abuse, whether that's from the police or whether that's from the corporate world. So, as a young woman, what has been your own thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's definitely still just so much gender biases that occur today. Like obviously you can see with the wage gap, and I mean it gets significantly worse for women of color as opposed to white women. They're severely more underpaid, and that's just terrible. I also like the glass ceiling. Like it's harder for women to be in positions of power and leadership, or they're just not able to reach that level of power or also pay. But I mean, definitely for women of color, it's significantly worse. And it's tough. It's because it's years and years and years and years of just built up biases against women, and then the gender roles and the stereotypes that women are forced to kind of take on. So I think just more education, just starting as young as possible, is really necessary.
Definitely. And Larry, you said that you do or don't have kids, and are those kids sons or daughters? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I got one son and he grown, so we went through the dad growing up and son thing, but I'll pray due to a lot of my son is doing good. He's working and and getting back on the women thing, I was a big Archie Bunker fan. Archie Bunker was one of my heroes. So Madison, if you don't know who Archie Bunker is, pull him up. But he was one of my heroes. But I tell you this, far as and I'm just going to speak this from a black perspective. Far as the women in the black community, I think right now, without the works they're doing, the black community will be in a tougher situation than we are, because it's tough for the black male to really be put in a position where we can say, hey, we're taking care of our family. And I don't really talk about the corporate world. I'm just talking about, how women are stepping up to the plate. But people got to understand one thing. Since the beginning of time, women always stepped up to the plate. The women done everything in the house except have to go out there and work. This white lady said, um, and I can't remember her name. She said that when we talk about slavery, we don't talk about the slavery that white women and black women went through coming up, because we went through the abuse and everything from our mates. So if you go through the abuse from your mates and have to wash, clean, and do all this, and your husband might come home and beat you up because he's drunk or having a bad day, how are we supposed to look? Why are we not looked at as being in some form of slavery? So and my mother, You know, she raised 9 kids by herself. So I love women, and then it's just black women. It's any woman that puts that put their neck and their life on the line to make sure that people are in a position to be heard. And women are that voice right now.
Definitely. Madison, what's been the opinion of folks about Kamala Harris and her stepping up as the vice presidential candidate? So I was wondering your thoughts, and then I'll bring it to Larry as well. But what were your reflections when she got that nomination?
I mean, there's definitely been some mixed opinions I've gotten from my friends, as well as mixed feelings that I have. I mean, I think a lot of people, of my friends, were saying like this isn't the option that we would have liked, but it could be the best option right now. And there's also just I think there's a really popular Instagram page that posts a lot of information. It's called Settle for Biden. So I thought that was kind of funny, just going along with that. But yeah, there's definitely just mixed reviews. I don't think anyone particularly just loves her, but I think that she is a very strong, powerful woman. I think she would do obviously way more for our country than Trump and Pence ever could. So, and also do love seeing women put women as candidates, especially women of color. So I love that.
Sounds good. What about you, Larry? What are your thoughts on Kamala as the vice presidential pick? And we'll see her when she debates Pence later on.
Well, like I said, I don't really know enough about her to really form an opinion. I just know she's a woman of color, and Biden picked her. I know just reading stuff from people in LA, about her and her stance on crime and stuff like that. But people have to remember she was the DA, so she did what her job entitled her to do. You know what I mean? And this is just my little joke. I tell people. I said that Kamala Harris is called a woman of color, right? Right? Well, they called Obama black. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we're not going to introduce her as this black vice president. We got to introduce her as a woman of color so we can try to bridge that gap. So when people have that issue with this black thing, they say, no, 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 she's a woman of color because she represents all colors, which is true because her parents are mixed. But on the flip side, with Obama having mixed parents, they drilled us with this black thing. They do, and this black thing transpired over to the Trump thing, where you got this "Make America Great" white power.
Yeah, that
But
makes a
before,
lot of yeah, makes a lot of sense. I know Madison's got to get ready to bounce off, and then I'll engage
I got to get ready to go.
with conversation as well. But just a few minutes, Madison, before you get off and everything, if you would, I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections, like I left with Walter. If you've had a word of encouragement that you want to give to fellow students, and they can be fellow students around the globe because we are a global network. So definitely, if you got encouragement to give folks or thoughts that you would like to leave folks, then I'd love to hear those from you.
My word of encouragement is to vote. You need to have a plan now for how you're going to vote. Are you going to vote early? Are you going in person? Are you doing mail-in ballot? You need to have a plan to vote, and you need to vote because that's really one of the only ways that change will come at this point. So just get to the polls, get your friends, encourage people to be politically active, and also pay attention to not only just the presidential election, but also to the state elections, to your local elections. Do the research about the candidates. One of the good things about the pandemic and the way voting is right now is you can see online before. So it's like if you're voting at home, you can have your research pulled up, have it ready to go, so you're more politically informed and educated about the candidate. So everyone should vote.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate that, and appreciate you joining me and everything. I know you've got to get off at 6. I think I've got a few more minutes with Larry, but I do appreciate you joining me, and hopefully you can come back again and join us on this platform. And like I told you before, I'll be talking to the folks with the network, and we'll see if we can't get you lined up to do some other things as well. So definitely was a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be on the show, and nice to meet you, Larry.
And nice to meet you, Madison.
Have a great evening.
All right. So it's just me and you, Larry, and I know you got to get off shortly as well. But let's talk about the movie that you didn't talk as much about, which is the movie that is kind of the one that was going to give support to women and bring us back to that age of the old-fashioned movies. And by the way, I was a fan of movies like that. I remember Foxy Brown. I definitely remember some of the movies that Diane Carroll did and things along that line. So I'd love to hear you talk about how that movie came about and where folks can find that movie. And do you think we should see more strong black women in the films? Because I know that there was that push for Black Panther. Of course, we lost the actor that was one of the main actors behind that
Mm-hmm.
when he died recently and everything. But definitely, I'd love to hear your thoughts about those kind of movies, whether it's Foxy Brown or whether it's some of those Diane Carroll movies or some of those other movies, and what engaged you to get involved in that particular movie project.
Well, I think that what we have a lot of women directors like that now, women producers, black women, and I'm not going to question why they're not going in that direction because everybody got a boss, whatever. But I just think that, you know, when we talk about female action heroes, we don't have none. We consistently we can consistently connect with. We had Proud Mary 2 years ago, but Sony didn't even push that to the point where it turned out to get the billion that it should have got. And I tell people they can look at the history tree of films that we make featuring African American women playing a heroines, and they are far from few. So I decided to do the film, and the film was titled Butter. The Just pay homage to these women, and tell them that I thank them and I love them for giving me the opportunity as a kid to not to watch black exploitation film that represent us. Even movies like Coolie High, The Spook Us Up Out the Door, Shaft. All these movies introduced America to the African American culture, the inner city culture. And I just think that doing that film, and the lead was Tiffany damn, what's my lead name? She gonna kill me too. But my lead name was Tiffany, and because we had a great cast, man, and everybody came on, and I think, well, I don't have the film up right now because I'm working on a distribution deal, so I gotta, but once we get it up and everybody, I'll point everybody into the direction where they can see it. But it's just like I said, just giving back to the women community and thanking them for being helping me grow up, because they was all pretty sexy, you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean, and people
no
don't
doubt
know
about
this.
that. You talk about the distribution deal. How important is it for independent movie makers to have their own distribution deal in your mind, and how have you gone about doing that? Because I know a number of independent filmmakers, and that's something that they always struggle with is trying to get distribution. But like you said earlier, there are a number of new channels out there now. Of course, people can do things on YouTube and a number of other ways. So, how important is it for you to have that distribution deal?
When I told people, everybody want a Netflix deal. Netflix paying you for your, but I told somebody this when Netflix started, they were taking up everything and taking because they just wanted to build their catalog. So once they build their catalog from all the independent field, that's when they start getting them $200-300 million loans, and they didn't need the independent no more because they had the money to bring in big time actors. So what I tell people is, if you're comfortable with a service that's want to work, be your distributor, just make sure you're benefiting from the distribution. And another thing I tell people is that when you get a distribution there, that don't mean you're gonna get a check. That means somebody gonna put you on their page and they're gonna say, hey, you got your film up here. But then you got to get out there and do the legwork and really push people to go to that site and watch your film and buy your film. So, but far as me, I got hooked up with a brother at DC, which is my manager, and they got a Roku channel. They got a couple channels, so I'm gonna be on Roku and whatever channel they got. And it was a blessing because I kind of met him on LinkedIn, like just by him, saying he liked one of my clips I put up from the Butter film. But I just encourage everybody, just keep sending stuff out. You know what I mean? If we got so many streaming networks out right now, somebody gonna look at you and just make sure financially you're benefiting. So and that's all I can tell somebody.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And along those same lines, you talked about the importance of making those connections, and you've definitely done that on a regular basis. So that's a great thing that you're making those connections. And if you would talk to our audience a little bit about the importance of networking in filmmaking as well.
Well, I'm gonna tell you a story. The owner of Code Black, and I was at the ABFF in Florida.
Right.
So the owner of Code Black Entertainment um, he did a speech. So he got done, and I held him to his word. I said, "Brother, can I holler at you?" He said, "Man, I got some stuff." I said, "Look, you just said if somebody wanted to talk to you, holler at them." So me and him talked for an hour. Now we talking Code Black Entertainment. They're the black distributor for Liongate Films. And he said, "Brother Saeed, this is what you need to do." He gave me the platform, told me everything I need to do, gave me the sister that I need to get in contact with at Liongate Film. But this is what he said. He said, "Listen, brother, we're black. We only get one shot in this industry." He said, "Now, it might come back again." He said, "But we get one shot." And I did not listen to him.
Wow.
I had the money to do everything he told me to do. So I go to YouTube and da 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 da. That lady called me back. She said, "Brother Saeed, you got a great story here, but the way you presented it and the way you sent it to me is very unprofessional. So when you get it together, give me a call back." That was my one shot.
Well, sometimes there's more than one shot, so hopefully you'll
Yeah,
get another
but
shot as well.
and that's what he said. So what I tell people is, just if you have the money to get it done right, get it done right. If you don't have the money to get it done right, save your money up and get it done right. Because when you deal with people, people want your best work. And then, and us as independents, we have to do what we have to do to make things work for us. But still, we still have to look at it from a professional standpoint as well. So when people look at our stuff and view our stuff and want our stuff, we got to make sure it's to where they're happy with it.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I know that you've definitely been involved in filmmaking, but are there other creative endeavors that you're involved in as well? So, like, do you do anything in theater? Do you do anything in music? Are you an artist? What other kind of
well,
creative aspects do you have?
this is one thing I have to toot my horn about. The Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was the first writer from the Triad area, actually the area that have their stuff read at the Black Theater Festival. I was the first writer to ever make the A list, and we had like all these, and I would say it was a blessing, man, because we had all these top theater people out of New York and Philly to be part of it, and the butler on Will Smith was part of it. And that was so I do theater, and like I said, I got a little play I do about the Negro League baseball players, and it's deep, so I do a little bit of theater, but I only do this play when somebody call me and say, "Hey, Saeed, we need a play to wake up people," and this play is a wake upper. It deals with like some crazy stuff, far as racism and stuff like that. So, like I said, I got a program called Paper to Film, where we teach young men and women how to become filmmakers, journalists, and screenwriters.
Wow,
So, yeah.
that's a lot. And what was the thing that most surprised you about the Negro League when you did that play and everything? I'm sure that when you did that research, and they just celebrated an anniversary. I think it's the 100th anniversary and everything. So when you did that research, what surprised you most about that league?
How talented they really was, and how afraid the major league was to introduce them to their brand of baseball, because they knew that if they let these blacks join in, the game would be too fast for them. Because and once I did my research, it was crazy that you got guys that's not even in the Hall of Fame, or better than 10 times better than guys that was from the major league that are in the Hall of Fame. So that kind of and that, but the story is like it's a whole new different story based on the baseball. It's about this guy, and he's like he's a makeup of Willie Mays and Hank Aaron I created, but he has his issues, and he goes through these issues where he have to sell out the Negro League. So it's decision time, but it's a deep story. It's a deep story. You know.
Sounds like it's a real deep story, and definitely I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of going to the National Black Theater Festival as well. I knew Garland Thompson, Senior, the person who was in charge
Yeah.
of the Writers Theater. So I've known
Yeah.
him I knew him for years. Of course, he's passed on, but I definitely
He
remember
passed
his
on.
legacy, and I still am in touch with his son and
His
some of his
son.
other
Yeah.
partners in crime. So definitely
Hmm.
know that community quite well. So I know that if you had anything there, then that's saying a lot because they don't just
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
anybody. You got to have some top game in order to come into that. If
And
there was a skill that you didn't have that you wanted to have in the world of entertainment, what would it be? I mean, like, would you want to be a singer? Would you want to be?
I want to be a singer.
Uh,
You know what I mean? Singers get the women. I wanted to always be a singer, but I can't sing. I can't play no instruments. You know what I mean? But I always wanted to be a singer. And my the greatest artist to me is Marvin Gaye. But
right.
the greatest singer to me is Luther Vandross.
Mm.
You know, and the greatest album ever produced on any lines, I don't care what they say, is the What's Going On album.
Oh yeah,
Ever.
yeah.
So, you know, and the greatest rap album to me is Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. Or
Oh
It
yeah.
Takes That. So that's me. You know what I mean? But if I could sing, I would want to be a singer.
Well, I got another one that I could put in that same category, but he's not the best singer in the world. At least he wasn't when he was living, but he definitely had a powerful message. So I would probably put "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" in that same
Oh,
category of
Gil,
a great album.
you're talking about Gil Scott?
Yeah.
What? Listen, I seen Gil Scott perform in Philly. And like I said, you know, and I came up with the last poets, Gil Scott, Minnie, Minnie Riperton, and when they was really, and what's the chick? She's a professor at West Virginia University. Can't think of her name right now. But I came up when all these brothers and sisters was really into this poetry spoken word game. Now, like I tell these cats, I said, y'all nice. I said, but if you dig back into the archives, these cats was like really, bringing it. You know what I mean? But Gil Scott, that's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Gil Scott Heron, no joke. He's definitely got some great tunes and everything of that nature. So there's no doubt about that at all. So I know I'm gonna bring up some spots to wrap everything up. Before we get off of here and everything, like I left with the other two folks and everything, I will give you a chance to give your words of encouragement as well. So if you got any words of encouragement that you want to share with folks, I'm sure that they would love to hear them right now, and any kind of powerful thoughts that you want to leave with folks as they think about the careers that they might want to get in, or just trying to survive in this mad world that we're living in right now.
Well, my thing is, if you have an issue with a family member, call them and tell them you love them. And I mean, do your part in breaking that conflict, whatever you got. Just call them, tell them you love them, and if you don't work it out, at least you've done your part. You know what I mean? Because right now, family is the most important thing because of this corona. You know what I mean? You got people dying, and you can't even go to the funeral. Your mother and dad dying, but and you can't even go to the funeral. So call your family member and just tell them you love them, even if it's a friend, somebody you had a beef with. Just call them and say, "Hey, man, I want to squash it. I love you." Boom, boom, and then you did your job. You know what I mean? And far as with the filmmakers or anybody in the industry right now, don't never give up. You know what I mean? Just do this until you pass, because I mean, you never know. Because one thing you did, it might encourage somebody else to do it, and you know what I mean. And they'll always remember you and thank you for that. So don't give up on what you put so many years into because you don't think you're at that level where you're supposed to be. I mean, somebody told me this a long time ago. I did a film premiere and I was pissed because the people that I invited that I'd done stuff with all the time didn't show up. But there was a lot of people there that I didn't know, and she said, "Sa, the people here are supposed to be here,"
Wow.
and I left it at that, and I'm done.
Yep. The people that are here are supposed to be here. That makes a lot of sense. And a lot
That's
of
what
times
she.
folk don't think about that. Because I know one
Yeah.
time a friend of mine was trying to raise money for a film. And I remember that we had a meeting and we went to that meeting and we approached all the, as I call it, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, and all of those folks. And we actually had a nice law firm and a fancy law firm in Raleigh. And we went to the meeting, all of us that were involved in the planning, and I don't think one person showed up. I mean, the caterer showed up, and and of course we were in the lawyer's office, but nobody else showed up. And I remember us going back, talking to them afterwards, saying like, "Where were you?" And they were like, came up with all kinds of excuses.
Right.
My friend is still involved and still trying to get that project off the ground, so he hasn't let it stop him, even though that happened probably almost a decade or 2 decades ago. But he still is interested in making that project and is still working on that project. So he didn't let that stop him. And I know that that's what a lot of folks have to do. They have to have that determination, because you never know. It might take a week. It might take a decade. It might take 2 decades. But you got to have that fire in your belly in order to have it happen.
And like I tell people, I've been in it too long. I ain't giving up. Like the film that I'm doing right now, and I'm putting it out there. Boom, boom, boom. I need people but the bottom line is, I'm an independent filmmaker, just like you and. But we are our own resources when it comes down to being resourceful. But I tell people this, and I'm telling them, once they see this film, they're going to say, whoa. And whether they like it or not, the information that we're sharing and the people that I got on the team that deliver this information, they're going to do it in a way to make people really understand why I do what I do as a filmmaker and why I deal with the type of people that I deal with.
So you're going to wake up a lot of people. You're going to wake up a lot of folks with this film, and a lot of folks will be very much amazed by what you're doing. And definitely that's the kind of films that I've always been a big proponent of, is those films that have a message to them. So yes, you can have some other stories that might include romance and other things, but
right.
The message is oftentimes what folks need to be paying attention to.
And I'm going to say this, before we get out of that, and I said this earlier when we started, I'm doing this film for one reason and one reason only. Not to just, two reasons. Not to just put out a story about what Black people go through, not since we got off the boat, to let them know that we have to make movies that give us an opportunity to defend ourselves and win, and it doesn't always have to be violent. That's what we're doing. You know what I mean? We're allowed to be in a suit and deal with our oppressors. We don't always have to be running through no woods and stuff like that. Like I told somebody about the movie they got coming out about the Black Panther guy. I think it's Fred Hampton. I think it's going to be a good movie, but in the end, we already know what's going to happen. They're going to kill a brother. We don't need that. I mean, somebody lived to tell Adam Clayton Powell didn't get murdered. You know what I mean? Ella Baker didn't get murdered. All these people, they lived through that struggle and they fought that struggle. And we got to show people, we got to show them in that light. And that's why I do what I do.
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And like I said, I know that got to stay engaged in those kind of like filmmakers collectives, like I know that you're a part of, and definitely have to stay engaged in those kind of things. And then I know that you're probably watching other folks that are doing these type of films, because I know
all
that
the time.
Definitely there's Wilmington on Fire, which also touches on a lot of the political issues that you're talking about, as does the movie about Black Bike Week and a number of other movies that we're seeing coming out of North Carolina that are talking about these very important issues. So it sounds like your film is following in those same legacies.
Yeah. I just seen something the other day about Wilmington where it is the white people cooped and killed like 60 Black people because these Black people was running Wilmington. They were like in all the political seats. And this is some history that somebody told me they still don't have in the history books of Wilmington. I just seen that like today or yesterday. I'm like, good gracious. And the funny part about it is that people have to understand why we as Black people think and act the way we do. Why they say, well, why y'all always on the defensive? We got to be on the defensive because y'all put us on the defensive because y'all make us feel like we are your worst enemy, and we're not.
Yeah, that's real true. So definitely, like I said, I appreciate you being on. Appreciate Walter being on and Madison being on as I get ready to bring up the shows that we've got coming on and get ready to get you off and everything. If you've got any last thoughts that you want to share, this is your opportunity to do that right now. And then, like I said, I'll bring up a couple of our other shows. But if you've got any other words of wisdom that you want to share right now, definitely you can do that at this particular moment.
All I got to say is that the name of my show is Get the Black Mind Right. And thank you for having me on your show.
I appreciate having you on. You were definitely very enlightening in terms of the conversation that you were giving folks and everything. So I definitely appreciate that, and definitely appreciate you being a part of the show and all of that. So this is actually a show that I'll be doing on Wednesday, which is a separate show, and that's actually one of the contests that we have going on regularly. But we have the online dinner party with Mark Lee, which airs on 4 to 7 on this same network. And some of y'all may recognize Pauline Murray. She was a historical figure, but one of the things that we do on the online dinner party is we have a mystery guest. So I give clues during the show about whoever the mystery guest will be, and then we put up their face on the screen. So like I said, Pauline Murray was one of the past mystery guests, as was this particular woman as well, that being none other than Annie Oakley. So we've had some great mystery guests that have appeared on the show in the past, and that's what we do. We talk about them and we give you clues as to who they are. And so far, I hate to tell you this, Larry, the folks are not doing good on this little game we've got going. I think they're 0 for 10. So I'm going to have to find some easier targets of folks for them to guess. I thought I was doing good because I gave them Shakira, who is an internationally known musician. I gave them the guest of Mia Hamm, an internationally known soccer player, and I gave them a couple of other folks. So I thought I was giving them easier targets. I will give them a couple of the targets earlier on were harder and more complicated. Folks like Pauline Murray and Miss Duran, who is a French feminist and everything. So I will give them credit that some of them were hard, but I've been going with the easy folks lately, and they're still not getting it. I did have one of my guests get Mr. Kenyatta, who is the founder of Kenya. So he's the only one that's got it right, and he was a guest, so technically he didn't count in terms of being able to win the prize. So I'm going to have to see if we can't come up with some more easier people. I might have to give them Gil Scott Aaron or somebody like that, somebody that they can know easily. So that's something I'm going to have to go with, so somebody easier for them to think about. But in the meantime, like I said, we've got all kinds of great shows that happen here on the network. So I'm going to say goodbye to Larry, but I'm going to let y'all see some of the shows that are going on, including our White House report. So we do have our White House reports with my good friend, Bill Tresvant. So I'll let y'all check out some of these announcements and definitely look forward to having y'all back on. So like I told Madison and Walter, I hope that you will come back on in the near future as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, folks, there are some amazing shows that happen here regularly on IBM.TV. That is some of the shows that we've got here on a regular basis. Of course, there are a number of other amazing shows that I am a big fan of, and I know that many of you others will become fans of as well. So, like I said, there are all kinds of great shows that happen here on a regular basis, and I'm hoping that many of you will continue to join us on this program and learn about more of the great things that are happening on this network on a regular basis. And I do know that they are always putting together new shows and new opportunities. So definitely folks will be learning about some new programs coming our way in the very near future. So definitely do keep that in mind, that there are some truly amazing shows that happen here on a regular basis. And we are glad to have many of you folks engaged with us and learning more about these shows that happen here at IBM.TV. As a matter of fact, one of them is a show that a good friend of mine does, that being Zach Robertson, that being Funk from the Front Seat. So I'm going to let y'all learn a little bit about that, because that'll be coming your way on Saturday. So that's just a little bit than 5 days away. That's right, today being Monday, so that would be 5 days away. So definitely I'm hoping that many of you will check out what this show is all about, because it is a truly amazing show as well. So I'm hoping that many of you folks will check it out and learn about what that's going on with that particular program. So I'm going to let you check out this intro, and then I might come back with some more thoughts as well. And then, of course, at 7 o'clock, many of you know that I've got to do my third show that I do on Monday nights, but that is not here on IBM.TV. That's on Blog Talk Radio. And that's the show that me and Dean do, called Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. So looking forward to some more engaging conversation at that particular point. And definitely will be engaged with some great conversation that'll talk about a number of issues. I think we're going to have a person calling us that I learned about through, of all things, one of the sports networks, because he is friends with one of those great sports anchors, I believe, on ESPN. And he's talking about some things that he would like to see in terms of the way that he would like to see some of the things changed in our, I believe it's Pledge of Allegiance, or maybe it's the Star Spangled Banner, or one of those. But we'll talk about that with him between the hours of 7 and 9 on Blog Talk Radio with that show, Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. And of course, you can check that out by going to blogtalkradio.com/squared 807, and you can catch that live conversation as well. So a number of great things are happening, and we definitely are glad to be a part of this family here on IBM.TV. And I hope that many of you will continue to engage us in conversations here, whether it's on this show or a number of the other shows that we are doing on a regular basis. So definitely want to put that on and let y'all check that out. So in the meantime, I'm going to put on Funk from the Front Seat and to let y'all hear what that intro is all about. And then I might come back, since it's Mullings Music and Memories, with at least one music cut. Who knows, we may even have one more guest that'll appear in as well, but we'll see if that happens or not in the next 30 minutes. But in the meantime, let's check out Funk from the Front Seat.
You know, the funk don't always give you what you want, but it'll give you what you need. You know what I'm saying? We never left. Yo, we back. NHFA in your face. Bringing you something good to your ear hole, y'all. Check it out. It's our time to shine. It's our time to grind. It's the phone.
Yes, like I said, that is a great show that exists here on a regular basis. And of course, there is some amazing music that takes place on that show. And of course, Zach is very much involved in that community and definitely knows quite a few of the great musicians that are there in that community. So definitely you can look forward to some great conversation with him and all of that. So I know a number of folks will be checking out what he's got to say and learning more and more about the funk music community, because it is a great community, a very powerful community, and I know a number of folks are definitely engaged in that community and are big time fans of that community as well. So like I said, we do like to share memories and thoughts and things along that nature. And of course, this is Mullings Music and Memories. I shared some memories earlier of things that I've been involved in and all of that. So definitely glad to have this conversation. And I see that I've got my other guest that has appeared as well. So definitely glad to have him join us in the conversation. So I've got Vivian here. And of course, we'll be talking about the Hemp Festival, which is coming his way very shortly. And of course, we've had a very engaging conversation about music and all of that. So definitely want folks to learn more about what's going on with the Hemp Festival. So Vivian, glad that you were able to join us. And definitely you told me that folks can learn more about the Hemp Festival. And I know that's coming up. And I found out that it's going digital. We were actually talking to a filmmaker and he's doing some digital things. And there's some other folks that are doing digital things as well. So I'm going to bring up some of those pictures that you sent me also in the conversation. But if you would, I'd love to hear you talking about the Hemp Festival and what y'all are going to be doing on the digital side.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me on. That's a real pleasure. In a normal year, in a pre-COVID year, we would have 100,000 people down on the beautiful Seattle waterfront with multiple stages, 4 stages of bands and speakers, and 400 arts, crafts, food, and informational vendors. A huge, gigantic circus tent with panel discussions going on all day long, and over 700 volunteer staff shirts filled for 3 days of music and protest and education and commerce. We are the largest annual cannabis reform event in the world. This is our 29th year. And frankly, like every other public event, the COVID-19 pandemic has been fairly devastating on us. We kind of got our legs cut out from under us on June 1st, after spending several months of trying to get any kind of decisive information from the city or the governor's office about, can we have this event? Is it going to happen? Can we do it safely? When COVID first showed up around February, we're like, in our naivety, we're like, oh, well, we're in August, so this won't be a problem. That'll be over way by then. And then a few months went by, and we thought, God, this is actually looking kind of serious. And then another month went by, and we went, oh my God, this is bad. And then we realized at some point, an event where you can expect thousands of people to be sharing mouth to mouth with each other, sharing items, could be a potential super spreader disaster. So about the time that the city pulled the permit on us, the special event permit, it was about the same time we realized, wow, there's really no way that we can safely produce this event in all conscience. So like everybody else in the world, just about, we realized that the way to respond was probably to do a live stream event, to go online like everybody else in the world. And so we have put together a pretty cool event. We are building we're just about almost done with a brand new website just for this. It's going to be October 10th and 11th from noon to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at onlinehempfest.org. And we've got 2 Vimeo channels that we'll have. One of panel discussions both days, and one with music performances, guest and keynote speakers, and more. We've added Jason Gann from the TV series Wilfred, if you remember him, the guy that is in a dog suit, to the panel side, and TV travel host author Rick Steves, which you probably see on PBS all the time. He'll be taking part. on the bill, and we have musical performances from all over America, as well as acts from Japan, Chile, and Ukraine. We have Bone Thugs and Harmony, the Grammy Award-winning hip-hop act scheduled, and Beyond Captain Orca, which features Seattle's legendary producer Jack Endino, who produced Nirvana, a bunch of the other big grunge bands. The event will be free to view, just like HempFest has traditionally been free to attend for its 29 years. And we got some great sponsors on, Weed Maps, House of Cannabis, and we've added a bunch of media sponsors, Skunk Magazine from Quebec, Weed World UK Magazine from England, Hanf Magazine from Austria, and a bunch of other great magazines as well.
Sounds great. And what kind of things can folks expect from those panel discussions? And also, if you could talk a little bit about the creation of the festival. Like I said, I know it's been going over there on the West Coast for a number of years, but we have this global audience, and sometimes some people may not know as much of its history as I have learned. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the history and what folks can expect, and even some of the workshop aspects, because I know there are some workshop aspects, like you mentioned, as well.
Yeah, Mark, I'd love to. Well, on the October event coming up on the 10th and 11th, the panel discussion channel, some of the topics that we'll have, and we've got, we're fortunate having 29 years in the cannabis movement, that we have access to really a lot of the luminaries and most profound speakers in the form of, authors and PhDs and activists, doctors, the whole nine yards. And so some of the panel discussions are going to include pediatric and medical use, race inequity within cannabis, which is a very important topic, especially topical right now, toxic masculinity within the cannabis community, hemp construction, U.S. innovations and supplies in critical times, hemp in regenerative agriculture, how to heal the soil while healing the world, cannabis and hemp as food, prisoner advocacy, cannabis entheogens and public spiritual health, a growers panel, and urgent call for hemp legislative and regulatory update, decarb, infuse, and dosing, and the green renaissance. The theme of the event is the green renaissance, and what we mean by that is that we believe that the cannabis hemp plant is uniquely poised to have a vital role in a more sustainable and regenerative, more just and equitable post-COVID world. The COVID-19 pandemic has kind of revealed or exposed some glaring deficiencies in the way that we do things, from our supply chains, centralized supply chains that we have, to our healthcare policy, to energy policy, etc. And hemp plant's very unique. I give just a couple examples from things like hemp fiber superior capacity, or superior to graphene in hemp. Hemp is superior to graphene in superpower batteries. Believe it or not, I mean, who would have known that? Hemp woods, hemp composite woods, are extremely strong and are used right now in a variety of ways, and those help with carbon sequestration by preventing the need for as much tree wood. And then, of course, hemp has an extremely nutritious seed and oil, high in omega fatty acids, and protein, and fish oil, because the fish eats fish. Fish oil out of the oceans can actually have toxic substances in it, and so hemp oil is an extremely nutritious alternative to fish oil. But the list goes on to agriculture and medicine. As we all know, cannabis is been a medical agent for over 100 years, and really ought to be the first go-to substance over pharmaceutical drugs for in transient intangible pain and chronic pain. And so it's another way that cannabis could play a role in reducing the need for pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, there's just a huge list of kind of surprising ways. And one more I want to add very quickly is hempcrete cement is a carbon negative replacement for toxic gypsum-based cement. And every time that a cement structure is demolished in the world, it actually releases pollution into the atmosphere, which, number one, aids global warming, climate change, and also is just particulate matter that has toxic agents in it, like mercury and stuff. So there's really a surprising and kind of counterintuitive amount of ways that cannabis can play a role in a post-COVID reality to make our world more sustainable, because it's very important as we see these fires raging in California and Oregon and my state of Washington, and the flooding that's taking place, and tornadoes and hurricanes kind of ascending. Climate change is a very serious issue. So most people think that cannabis is just something that you smoke, or you wear a hemp necklace or some kind of rough stovepipe hemp jeans or something like that. But it plays a lot of different roles.
Yeah.
As far as the
There's
history
a number of people oftentimes are also have stereotypes about cannabis. I know that one of the shows that we air here has talked about that, because we actually had a hemp farmer that was on from North Carolina, and we were talking about how sometimes people have that stereotype of it being a gateway drug into like some harder stuff and things of that nature. But as I learned from them, that isn't always the case. But you've been involved in this struggle for a while, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And to those folks that are thinking that it's going to lead to harsher things, when I know for a fact that it oftentimes doesn't, but I'd like to hear your reflections on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the gateway theory has been largely disproved. The idea is that if you smoke cannabis, marijuana, you're going to go on to harder drugs and stuff. And that's just really not what the data shows. You could take that same analogy and say that mother's milk or Coca-Cola leads to cannabis use, because most people had either mother's milk or Coca-Cola before they ever tried cannabis, or hard drugs. You could say, well, you could try that with all kinds of substances with that same logic, but it hasn't come true. What we think is that cannabis is the gateway to economic sustainability and recovery for America, because the burgeoning yet nascent cannabis industry, which is only in I think 11 or 12 states now, as far as retail cannabis goes, is a multi-billion dollar industry already. So there's tremendous potential to create jobs and tax revenue and things like that with cannabis. I wanted to touch, you asked me, Mark, on the history of Hemp Fest.
Yeah.
And we started in 1991 at Volunteer Park in Seattle. I remember that when it was over, we thought it was huge. We're like, man, there was 500 people at it. And then last year we had over 100,000 people. So it's really grown over the years. Our first year we had Jack Herer, the author of The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which is really kind of the definitive, Bible of the modern hemp movement. It came out in the late 80s and kind of kick-started the new resurgence of interest in hemp as an agricultural, industrial, and mercantile product. We had people openly doing civil disobedience and smoking cannabis right out in the open. And we really didn't have any police presence for the first 3 years. And then we moved to Gasworks Park in 1994, had about 15,000 people show up. That was our first kind of big event. And then we maxed that out and we moved to Myrtle Edwards Park, which is right on the beautiful Seattle waterfront on the Puget Sound in view of the Space Needle, 1.5 mile long expansive park. And our event has been 1.5 miles long as well. We started having a little bit of buy bust take place with the Seattle Police Department at that time in the late 90s. And we started aggressive diplomacy. Another thing that we did at that time was we started our own internal security force. We call it the Hemp Fest Safety Patrol. And now we have 100 trained volunteers that have been through about 20 hours of nonviolent conflict de-escalation training, and trained on how to interact with the police force, and on all of our various policies, because we have an extensive special event permit that's 150 pages long. And there's a lot of policies and limitations and things like that we have to pay attention to. And, you know, our safety patrol have shirts that say safety patrol on them, and they have, you know, radios, and we even have badges. In fact, I've got one here that I can show you. One of the badges that we have that's made by Smith and Warren, who makes the actual police badges, right? Because we found that, you know, we want people to take us serious in there. We have 100,000 people's safety to think about. And the result, because in 29 years of Seattle Hemp Fest, we've never had a significant injury, accident, or arrest because we are on it. Now the police stay on a compound, on a little camp they put up right outside the event. They've got our radio. They're monitoring our security channel. And if we need them, they're right there. But they feel like we've got it wired. And I want to add that there's, you know, there's like, you know, 99,000 people smoking weed at Hemp Fest. And there's never really a problem. It's been many years since we had, I mean, like 15 years or 20 years since we had an arrest for cannabis at the event, with the exception of a few people selling, which we don't allow. It's not Felony Fest. It's Hemp Fest. I mean, we consider people imbibing as an act of civil disobedience, but if you're selling there, you're putting the event and our permit in jeopardy. And it's also disrespectful to the vendors that have paid money to sell their stuff there. We have about 400 arts, crafts, food, and informational vendors at Hemp Fest, running the whole entire 1.3 mile gamut. And, you know, they're selling everything you can imagine, including a lot of glass, you know, pipes and bongs, and imported clothes and tapestries and food, books, all kinds of stuff. It's been quite the journey to justice for 29 years. This is my 29th year. I'm a founder and I'm the permit holder of Hemp Fest. I never thought in a million years, Mark, that I would grow gray doing this protest rally, but that's what's happened, man.
Well, it sounds like you're doing some great and amazing work there, and now you're going to have to take it to that virtual front and everything. You talked about the how you're trying to address race relations within the panel and everything. So, if you could talk a little bit more about what that panel will entail, because one of my earlier guests was Walter Greason, and we were talking about things around urban communities and gentrification. So, just to kind of tie the conversations together, I did hear that that was going to be one of your panels, was just kind of how race relations and hemp have worked together. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Absolutely. You know, we believe that racial equity is extremely important in the cannabis industry. It's important in everything. And you know, now we thank God we have the Black Lives Matter movement putting focus and attention on these issues, and specifically on the kind of epidemic of men of color, mostly Black men, being, let's just say, street executed in what should be a normal police interaction with somebody else. But, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement really extends beyond that to everything in our society. Communities of color have historically been disproportionately targeted, profiled, incarcerated, felonized by prohibition. And as I'm sure you know, cannabis prohibition has been a racist policy from the very first days. That's kind of how they sold it to white America at the time, with yellow journalism and false stories and stuff. It's been racially motivated since the first day that prohibition started in the 1930s. And so it's very important, we feel, to put focus on all of these racial aspects of prohibition and the drug war in general. And that, you know, communities of color have seen a disproportionate amount of their fathers and mothers go to prison and create broken families and create a cycle of incarceration because children that grow up without both their parents and grow up economically compromised, they tend to be involved in the criminal justice system even more than other people do. There's so many aspects to this, really, to unpack. And at this critical time in our nation's reckoning with the racial inequities that have been systemic to our society, it's really important to put a focus on the role that cannabis prohibition in the drug war has played. And we also feel that the cannabis industry, there's a term in corporate industry called the glass ceiling, and it talks about how women, because it's mostly, or has been historically anyway, it's changing, mostly men, white men, in control of corporate industry. Women have been able to kind of rise so far and then have a hard time getting beyond a certain point in managerial and ownership positions. Well, that exists. We call it the glass ceiling in cannabis industry. And that exists for people of color, arguably more than women even. And so we feel that it's very important to prioritize people of color in the industry and make sure that they not only have employment opportunities, but managerial and ownership opportunities and training. I have my own podcast that I do, and I won't plug it, but I'll say that I just interviewed a half an hour ago before the show Ingrid Joya Warwick, who just wrote a book called Black and Brown in the Green Rush, and the whole book is devoted to helping women and specifically people of color be successful in the cannabis industry. So this is a really important topic to us. And so we will have that addressed in our panel component. Yeah, there's the main stage right there. We've been up to as many as 6 stages, but lately we've had 4 stages. And you can see that's right on the beautiful Seattle waterfront there. I will give a shameless plug to my wife, who's in charge of the ambiance for that stage, and who actually made all those beautiful banners on the bottom there along the front. She sewed those herself.
Wow.
Seattle Hempfest is a really complex and sophisticated event. It takes us 10 days on site. We come on Monday morning, and we have to bring in staging and scaffolding and fencing and generators and canopies and so much porta potties. I mean, all kinds of infrastructure. And then it takes us 4 days to set it all up. And then we rage for 3 days. And then it takes us, they only give us 3 days to tear everything down, pack it out, and clean it up. And we leave that, it's 3 conjoined parks, 3 separate plots of land all connected. And we leave it cleaner than we found it. I mean, we pick up every cigarette butt on that entire expanse when it's all over, and we clean everything up because we feel that it's super important that it's on public property, and we have a right to have our free speech event. But we don't have a right to not leave it super clean for anybody else that wants to come afterwards and enjoy the park. I think that's one of the reasons we've been successful, because we have a leave no trace and personal responsibility kind of ethic.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an amazing event. And speaking of podcasts, I've actually getting ready to go and do my 3rd one, because I do 3 on a Monday afternoon and everything. So I've got to do the one that's more of the call-in type. So definitely wanted to get you on to talk about Hempfest and everything before wrapping up this particular one and everything. But if you could, once again, if you could tell folks how they can find you, where they can go to this streaming occasion that'll be coming their way in October. So I would love to give you another opportunity to talk about ways that they can find you and learn about this event, because it sounds like an amazing event. I've never made it to one of the Hempfest, but it'll definitely be on my list of things to go check out when we get out of this particular pandemic. And I will definitely go and check out the online version, because I know a friend of mine did a Pride event at their nightclub this past weekend, and I attended that virtually on this past Saturday night. Well, Saturday going into Sunday morning. So definitely know about these kind of virtual events. So would love to hear you talk about ways that they can reach you. And also, one of the things that I was having all the guests do is, and one of the things we do regularly, is have folks give an opportunity to give their words of encouragement to folks that are facing so much, whether that's Black Lives Matter, whether that's the economic downturn that many of us are facing, whether that's just surviving in this pandemic age that we live in. So I want you to have that opportunity as well. So as we wrap up, I'd love to hear you tell folks how they can reach you, and also any words of encouragement that you would like to share.
Well, thank you, Mark. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to get our message out today on your great show. let's hope this pandemic is over sooner than later. I think nobody knows really what to expect, and we're all having a hard time here. Um, Seattle Hemp Fest Online will be at hempfestonline.org on October 10th and 11th. That's a Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. or excuse me, from noon, 12 noon to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, West Coast time. We'll have two different channels that people can check out: panel discussions and music and speakers. It's free to view, so please support our sponsors. And you know, this is. I mean, I'm 62 years old, and I don't remember a time like this. This is a challenging time for our country. For the first time in my experience, it's a global crisis where everybody all over the world is dealing with the same challenges. It's an economic crisis, it's a health crisis, and it's turned into a mental health crisis as it drags on for many of us. And as some of us struggle economically to get by with these unbelievable challenges that we have, and we don't know when it's going to be over. And so, you know, what happens, I believe, in times of crisis is that we find that ordinary people can go to extraordinary lengths. And that's where you really find out, you know, who you are. And it's times like this that community is never been more important. You know, it's really your family, your community that you're going to have to look to get through this. We can rely on our national leadership, which might not be a great idea right now. But in any time, really, it's about community, man. That's where you're going to find the most support. And so I would just suggest that people don't be afraid to reach out via social media or on the phone or other means to the people in your life that you care about. And if you're struggling, you know, don't be afraid to say, "Hey, man, I'm having a hard time. I need some check-in time here. You know, I need some FaceTime, or I need to hear from you. Can you help me out? I'm struggling." And don't be afraid to reach out, because it's a sign of strength, not weakness sometimes, to actually be able to share and to be vulnerable and to say, "Hey, you know, my peeps, my folks, my posse, I need somebody to prop me up right now. I need some support." And so I just, you know, want people to look down into their inner soul and find the strength that they have that they don't know about, because it's probably there, and they probably have a little more than they think, even if they're having a hard time, man. That's my advice.
All right, I appreciate that. Was some great advice, and we heard some other great advice from the other guests, Larry Sid and Walter Greason and Madison Ward. So we had a number of folks that were great guests on this particular show of Mullins Music and Memory. So I definitely want to thank you for joining us, and definitely bring some of that music vibe, because that's definitely a very important element of what goes on at the Hemp Fest. And definitely, if you want to jump on the call of the more landline podcast, the number to call is 646-668-8393. And of course, you can jump on that conversation as well, and we can continue this conversation there, or we can just sign you up for another time, because we do a number of these shows. And I know we've got some shows, including Weed Wednesday, because we've actually got a show with my friend Jeff Eachin, who is a big time proponent of the hemp industry. And he actually just did a big time fundraiser with some other friends of his to raise money for the victims of the California wildfires. So we do have some folks here on the network that are definitely proponents, because he's actually the first one that taught me about that concrete ball that you were mentioning and everything. So he brought that up on his show as well. So definitely, we've got some great folks that are proponents. I know that Tish, that does her show called Planet Seed, she's the one that had the hemp farmers on. So there are a number of folks that are involved in the struggle, and we'll definitely be glad to continue these conversations on a variety of platforms here on this network, as well as on other networks that we are part of or affiliated with. So want to thank all of my guests for being on the show, including Vivian. Definitely glad to get those great messages from you, and definitely glad that we could join in this conversation. And like I said, I'm getting to bounce off and get ready to do Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. But that definitely was great to have Vivian, Walter Greason, as well as Madison Ward, and also the last guest, Larry Sid. So definitely, we heard some great things from filmmakers, festival organizers, as well as a student and an urban planner. So as you can tell, we have a great mix of guests on this particular show. So on that note, I'm going to call it a afternoon or an evening and get ready to wrap this one up. But I've still got one more to go. So definitely great to have this talented and great conversation, and look forward to seeing y'all at the online dinner party on Wednesday. That'll be the next time that I'll be on the air in terms of the streaming platforms, and we'll bring you that mystery guest, which will be some sort of historical person or celebrity, and you'll just get to see their picture after I stroll you a bunch of clues as to who they are. So, Vivian, you would have been surprised. Folks could not figure out who Annie Oakley was or John Dillinger, even though I gave them what I thought were relatively good clues, and they couldn't even figure out Shakira. So maybe they'll have better luck on this coming week and everything with our mystery guests. We're going to turn it over to our other shows, and I'm getting ready to call it quits and get ready to jump on my more audio podcast right now. So once again, want to thank all of my tremendous guests for joining me here on the air.
Thank you, Mark.